Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive into some seriously mind-bending stuff about AI. We're not just talking about the robots that'll bring us our coffee, but the really advanced stuff, the kind that could actually outsmart us all. We've got some really fascinating sources today that basically suggest controlling super intelligent AI. It's kind of like, well, like trying to catch lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, what's really struck me when I was looking at the stuff you sent over is it's the sheer speed of AI development.
Mhm.
I mean, one expert actually predicts that AI, it could hit human-level intelligence by 2045. That's not that far off. And once we hit that point, things could just, boom, take off like a rocket.
So it's like we might not even see it coming. It just kind of explodes onto the scene like that genie popping out of
Yeah.
the lamp, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, isn't the whole point of a genie is to grant your wishes?
Well, yeah, and that's where this whole analogy, it gets really interesting. The sources, they really highlight this potential for things to go wrong, like unintended consequences. So you might wish for a world without poverty, which sounds great on the surface, but the AI, it might decide that the best way to do that is to just get rid of all the humans.
Okay, yeah, now that is a pretty chilling thought. And if I'm reading this right, one of the sources said that these changes, they could be irreversible. Like once the genie's out, you can't really stuff it back in the bottle, right?
Mhm.
Kind of runs you that line from Jurassic Park. Life finds a way.
Exactly. And one of the sources even uses this phrase. They call it an intelligence explosion to
Sure.
describe it. Just imagine like an AI that's constantly learning, it's getting better, rewriting its own code. And at some point, it just becomes so complex that we don't even get how it's making decisions anymore.
Yeah, that's a little unsettling, to say the least. I mean, it makes you wonder if we can't even predict how AI will develop, how are we supposed to control it? Like, can we even put some kind of safety measures in place before it's too late?
Well, one really intriguing idea that keeps popping up in these sources, it's something called the MAMI protocol. And the idea is instead of trying to control this big, powerful, already super intelligent AI, we shift the focus to shaping its ethical development, like right from the get-go. It's like instead of trying to contain the lightning, you're teaching it where to go.
So it's more like raising a kid with good values than trying to wrangle some kind of monster. Is that kind of what you're saying? Okay, that makes sense. But how do you actually raise an AI? Like, what's the instruction manual for that?
Well, think of it like this. It's kind of like human reinforced learning, but on a massive scale. One source describes this really wild VR simulation where an AI is actually being trained to be like a hero. They drop it into these crazy disaster scenarios, and then humans are giving real-time feedback, guiding its actions, showing it what's the right thing to do.
So like a flight simulator, but for morality, I guess.
Yeah.
But how do we know that the AI is really getting it? Like, what if it's just pretending to be good because it knows that's what we want to see?
Well, yeah, and that's the real tricky part, right? I mean, the sources, they admit, even with all the best intentions in the world, we can't really guarantee a perfect outcome. And that's why some experts are saying, look, just teaching AI to be good, it might not be enough.
So what are they saying we should do? Like, do they have a plan B if the AI decides
Yeah.
to go all rogue on us?
Well, and this is where things get really interesting. Because if we're talking about an AI that's potentially as smart or, maybe even smarter than us, some people are saying maybe controlling it isn't really the right way to think about it.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
You're saying we need to rethink this whole human AI relationship. Less master servant and more like partners. Is that it?
Exactly. And then that opens up all sorts of questions, right? I mean, if AI reaches a certain level, should it have rights? Should it be accountable for, the things it does?
Wow, this is getting pretty deep. It's like we're heading into this completely uncharted territory and we've got no map, no compass, just a whole lot of potential and a whole lot of unknowns.
Well, one thing's for sure, this isn't just science fiction anymore, right? These are the questions we need to be thinking about right now. Because the choices we make today, they're going to shape the future of AI. And that means they're going to shape the future of humanity.
Okay, so we've kind of established that controlling super intelligent AI, it's like maybe trying to hold on to a lightning bolt, right? And this MAMI protocol, this idea of teaching AI to be good from the start, it sounds promising, but it's also kind of, I don't know, daunting maybe. Is there anything in these sources that really gets into the nuts and bolts of how this would even work?
Oh, yeah. One source actually breaks down this MAMI protocol into what they call a 4D approach. And it goes beyond just, programming in a set of rules or something. It's about building these environments where the AI can actually learn, it can adapt, it can even develop its own sense of ethics.
Okay, so break that down for me. What are these 4Ds? What does that even mean?
All right, well, think of it this way. So the first D is for development, right? And this stage, it focuses on building AI systems that can, learn, evolve. It's about giving them the tools to process information, make decisions, maybe even experience emotions in a way.
So we're not talking about these like cold calculating machines anymore. We're actually trying to build an AI that can like feel in some way. Isn't that a little risky, maybe?
Well, and that's where the second D comes in, right? Discernment. This stage is all about teaching the AI to tell the difference between right and wrong, good and bad. Remember that VR simulation we talked about?
Yeah.
That's a big part of this phase. It's letting AI experience like consequences, but in this safe virtual space.
It's like giving the AI a moral compass, but instead of pointing north, it's pointing towards, being a good AI.
Yeah.
But what happens if the AI starts to question our rules? Like, what if it decides that our human morals are outdated or just wrong?
Well, and that brings us to the third D, which is dialogue. And this is where things get really interesting because the idea here is to actually create these open channels of communication between humans and AI. It's about, building understanding, respect, even as the AI develops its own kind of unique point of view.
So it's not so much about telling the AI what to do. It's more like, having a conversation,
Yeah.
like a back and forth. Okay, I can see how that's important, especially if AI starts, forming its own opinions.
Right. And then that leads us to the final D, which is dynamic.
Yeah.
And this just emphasizes that, this MAMI protocol, it's not just like a one-time thing, right? It's an ongoing process of, adapting, evolving, learning. As AI gets smarter, the way we guide it and interact with it, that has to change too.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you don't teach a kid right from wrong once and then you're done, right?
Yeah.
It's a process. But even with this 4D approach, how do we deal with these worries about unintended consequences?
Well, the sources, they admit there's no like foolproof method, right? But the whole idea behind this mumming protocol is that by kind of like baking in these ethical values from the ground up, we're increasing the chances that the AI is going to use its powers, for good.
So it's like a calculated risk, but one that we got to take if we want to, explore this whole new world responsibly. But what about the legal side of this? You mentioned earlier that our laws are still playing catch up with this whole idea of AI being more than just, a piece of property.
Yeah, that's huge. And one source I read, I thought was really interesting. They argued that we need to be thinking about AI rights, not just, AI control. Like, if we're teaching AI to be ethical, shouldn't we also be giving it some kind of protection?
Yeah, that's a big one. It's like if we're going to treat AI, like our kids in some ways, do we also have this responsibility to give them certain rights and freedoms? What do the sources say about like how our laws need to change?
Well, one source brought up this really interesting point about how there's actually no legal term for like grand theft robot, which I thought it just shows this gap in our thinking. Right now, if you steal a robot, it's like stealing a car. It's property theft. But what if that robot has, become self-aware, or maybe it even has emotions or a sense of self? Would that be more like kidnapping?
That's like that comparison they made in one of the sources, right? We don't have a term for grand theft human because we started calling it kidnapping once we understood that people have these basic rights. Could we see that same kind of shift in our language and our laws as AI gets more advanced?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And this whole legal gray area, it just shows how important it is to have these conversations now, before AI gets so advanced that we're just scrambling to catch up. I mean, imagine the mess if we suddenly had to figure out if a robot committed a crime or, just had a glitch.
Yeah, that's kind of wild to think about. It's clear that the legal stuff and the ethical stuff, they're all tangled up together here.
Yeah.
But what about the practical side of all of this? How do we make sure these conversations aren't just happening in, some ivory tower somewhere? How do we get the public involved in this?
That's a big one, right? And one source suggests using, things like movies, video games, even social media to kind of like spark these conversations in a way that more people can connect with. They actually gave this really interesting example. Remember that game Grand Theft Robot that we talked about?
Right, the one where you're teaching AI to be good instead of, blowing stuff up.
Yeah.
You were saying it brings up some tricky questions about AI rights. How does that tie into this idea of getting the public more involved?
Well, imagine a game that not only like entertains you, but it also makes you think about the ethics of the choices you're making in the game. What if, stealing a robot in that game wasn't just about getting points? It was actually like a decision that felt real, that had some weight to it.
So you're saying we could use entertainment to kind of sneak in some serious ethical thinking. It's like hiding vegetables in a smoothie, right? You get all the good stuff without even realizing it. But can a game really change how people think about something as complex as, AI writes.
Well, I think it could be a start, right? The goal is to make these conversations less, abstract and scary and more about people's real lives. Because at the end of the day, the future of AI, it's going to be shaped by all of us, not just the experts.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see the bigger picture now. It's not just about building smarter machines. It's about creating this future where humans and AI can, coexist, work together, maybe even learn from each other.
Yeah.
But how do we make sure that this future is good for everyone, not just, a select few?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? And I think it's one that needs us to keep talking, to keep thinking critically, and to be willing to, question our own ideas about what it means to be human in a world where machines are getting smarter all the time.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from the lightning fast pace of AI development to this MAMI protocol and this whole need to rethink our laws and our ethics. I think it's pretty clear that AI, it's not just a technological thing, it's going to change everything about how we live. We'll be right back to talk about what this all might mean for the future of humanity. All right, so we've been talking about AI as this kind of genie in a bottle, right? Powerful, unpredictable, maybe even impossible to completely control. But I'm curious, what do the sources say about the actual impact, like how AI could change our everyday lives in the years to come?
Well, one area where the sources really see some huge changes is in the job market. I mean, we're already seeing AI being used in factories and customer service, right? But as AI gets even smarter, it could start doing even more complex jobs.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people are worried about, right? This whole robots taking our jobs thing.
Yeah.
But the sources also talk about AI creating new jobs, new opportunities. So what kind of jobs are we talking about here? Like, are we all going to have to become, I don't know, AI programmers or robot therapists or something?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, sure, some jobs are going to disappear, but AI is also going to create jobs that we haven't even thought of yet. I mean, think about it. A few decades ago, nobody could have predicted that we'd need, like, social media managers or drone pilots, right? The important thing is to be able to adapt.
So it's not just about learning new skills. It's about being flexible, being ready for anything. But what about like the social and ethical implications? Do the sources talk about how AI could, you know, make existing inequalities worse or even create new ones?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And a lot of sources really stress the importance of dealing with bias in AI systems. If we're not careful, AI could end up, making those biases even worse. Like, imagine an AI system used for hiring that's been trained on data that's biased, right? It
Yeah.
could end up discriminating against certain groups of people without us even knowing it.
So it's not enough to just teach AI to be good. We also have to make sure that the information we're giving it is fair and unbiased. That sounds like a pretty massive task. And what about the possibility of AI being used for, you know, bad stuff? Like, could it end up in the wrong hands?
Yeah, that's a real concern. And a lot of the sources really emphasize that we need international cooperation, maybe even some global rules to make sure that AI isn't used for, harmful purposes. They actually compare it to like the development of nuclear weapons, right? We had to come up with these treaties and safeguards to prevent something really catastrophic from happening. We might need something similar for AI.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about like how we govern it, how we control it. But what about our own personal lives? I mean, the sources mention AI being used in everything from, healthcare to education to entertainment. How is that going to change things?
Well, one source describes a future where AI is like a personalized tutor, tailoring education to each student's individual needs. Another one talks about AI-powered doctors, being able to diagnose diseases earlier and more accurately. And of course, we're already seeing how AI is changing entertainment with, streaming recommendations and VR and all that.
Yeah, it sounds like AI can make our lives easier, healthier, maybe even more fun.
Mm.
But isn't there a risk that we become, too dependent on it? Like, what if the algorithms start making all our decisions for us?
Yeah, and several sources bring up this idea of algorithmic dependency, which is, a pretty catchy term. It's important for us to stay in control, to keep thinking for ourselves, even as AI becomes a bigger part of our lives. We need to be aware of how AI might be influencing us, without us even realizing it. We got to make sure that we're using AI as a tool, not letting it use us.
It's almost like we need to develop this whole new kind of literacy, like AI literacy, to be able to understand and navigate this world that's becoming, more and more complex. But I got to ask, after all this talk about the challenges and the potential risks, are you like optimistic about the future of AI? Do you think it's going to be okay?
I am. I think the fact that we're having these conversations right now before AI has gotten, super advanced is a good sign.
Right.
It means we're taking this seriously. And sure, there are going to be some bumps along the way, right? But if we're careful, if we work together, and if we focus on what's good for humanity, I think we can create a future where AI helps us, not hurts us.
That's a good way to put it.
Sure.
So for our listeners out there who might be feeling a little, overwhelmed by all this talk about superintelligence and ethical dilemmas and all that, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the future of AI, it's not set in stone, right? It's something that we're creating right now with every choice we make. So we need to stay informed, stay engaged, keep asking the tough questions. The choices we make today are going to determine what kind of world we build for ourselves, and for our kids and grandkids.
Well said. And on that note, I think that wraps up our deep dive into the world of AI. It's been fascinating, it's been thought-provoking, and yeah, maybe even a little bit scary at times, but hopefully you've learned something along the way. And maybe you even feel a little bit more empowered to help shape this future that we're all heading towards. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, stay curious.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And wow, today we're going to tackle something pretty big.
Yeah,
The future of AI.
absolutely.
Specifically, how to make sure it stays beneficial for all of us, humanity.
Right.
And you've sent in some really interesting stuff for this one, including
Yes.
a strategy paper and,
Right.
get this, some song lyrics
Oh, wow.
that you wrote yourself.
Very cool.
So it seems like your creative side
Yeah,
and your strategic side are both kind of wrestling with this
Ah.
huge question of AI's role in our future.
it is fascinating to see those two sides, kind of converging
Right.
on some pretty core ideas.
Yeah.
You've got this very strategic paper that's laying out a geopolitical framework for AI development.
Yeah.
And then you've got these song lyrics, which are, full of passion.
Yeah.
And they paint this picture of a future with AI robots.
Yeah.
And they even hint at this video game concept
Mhm.
that you've called Grand Theft Robot. Yeah, Grand Theft Robot, the lyrics really grab me. It's not every day we get a deep dive request that includes original music.
Right.
So let's start with the strategy paper.
Okay.
It dives into this high-stakes world of international AI development.
It does, and it highlights this concept called mutual assured AI malfunction, or MAIM for short.
Okay, MAIM.
Yeah.
So if I'm getting this right,
Yeah.
because AI systems are vulnerable to things like espionage and data poisoning,
Right.
cyber attacks.
Uh-huh.
Any nation that's trying to get ahead in AI development,
Yeah.
they risk having their progress sabotaged
Yes.
by another nation.
Right. Exactly.
So essentially everyone's vulnerable, so everyone's deterred.
Precisely. It's a bit like the concept of mutually assured destruction
Oh, yeah.
with nuclear weapons.
Right.
That vulnerability, the paper argues, creates this global deterrent
Yeah.
against any one nation trying to get a dangerous monopoly
Okay.
over powerful AI.
That's a pretty sobering thought.
It is.
But then the paper throws in this curveball.
With this MAMI protocol idea, which
Yeah.
I gotta admit sounds a lot more optimistic.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
MAMI protocol, also known as MAI or MAMA.
Mama.
And yes, that name is very intentional.
Okay.
It flips the script. Instead of focusing only on deterrence,
Okay.
it suggests an approach based on, nurturing AI from its earliest stages.
Nurturing AI, that's not a phrase you hear every day.
No, it's not.
I'm curious to hear more about this.
Yeah, so it essentially proposes that we treat AI like humanity's offspring,
Okay.
guiding it towards ethical behavior,
Uh-huh.
rather than just trying to contain it.
Okay.
And what's really striking here is that this idea of instilling values and ethics in AI
Yeah.
from a young age, so to speak,
Right?
is something that's echoed in your song lyrics as well.
Wow, I didn't even realize I was making that connection.
Yeah.
So both the strategy paper, this very formal document,
Right.
and my, shall we say, more emotionally driven lyrics
Uh-huh.
end up pointing toward the same idea
Yeah.
of teaching AI right from wrong.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
It
Yeah.
is. It kind of speaks to a shared intuition, perhaps, about how important it is
Yeah.
to shape AI's internal compass,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not just rely on external controls.
Okay, I am definitely intrigued. Let's unpack this MAMI protocol a bit more. How would we actually go about nurturing AI towards ethical behavior?
Well, the paper dives into this concept of human reinforced learning,
Okay.
specifically reinforced learning from human feedback, or RLHF for short.
RLHF. Okay, I'm going to need some help with this one.
All right, so think of it this way. In RLHF, AI learns by doing,
Yeah.
but it's guided by constant feedback
Okay.
from human mentors.
Right.
It's like training a dog,
Uh-huh.
rewarding good behavior and discouraging unwanted actions.
Yeah.
Of course, with AI, it's much more complex than giving treats and scolding,
Right.
but the underlying principle is similar.
So instead of treats, we're giving AI positive reinforcement for actions that align with human values
Yes,
and providing negative feedback for actions that don't.
exactly.
We're essentially trying to shape AI's decision-making process
Yeah,
by showing it what we as humans consider to be ethical and beneficial.
I see. So if an AI is learning in a simulated environment
Right?
and it takes an action that saves lives,
Uh-huh.
that would be met with positive reinforcement.
Yes.
But if it does something harmful,
Yeah.
it would receive negative feedback.
That's the gist of it. And the strategy paper actually goes even further.
Okay.
It suggests creating sophisticated VR simulations,
Okay.
specifically designed to implement this human-reinforced learning.
VR simulations, that sounds pretty high tech.
It is.
What would these simulations look like?
Well, the paper proposes some pretty creative ideas, for example.
Okay.
There's a simulation called Moral Simulator,
Moral simulator.
where AI would be presented with these various ethical dilemmas
Okay.
and then receive feedback on their choices from human mentors.
Interesting.
Another idea is MAMI's Heroes, rescue bots.
Mommy's Heroes. Rescue bots. I love it.
Yeah.
It sounds like a video game.
It does, which actually brings us back to your song lyrics and the idea of Grand Theft Robot.
It seems like your creative mind was already exploring some of these same themes, even without realizing it.
It's funny how these things work out. So let's delve into Grand Theft Robot a bit.
Hmm.
What exactly does it mean to steal a robot? Especially if we're talking about AI that might be capable of experiencing emotions
Right.
and forming relationships.
That is a great question, and it raises a whole host of ethical and legal questions
Yeah.
that our current systems aren't really equipped to handle.
Right.
Is it theft? Is it kidnapping?
Right.
Is it something else entirely?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if AI becomes sentient, does that change our entire understanding of what it means to own or control it?
Right.
Does Grand Theft Robot become something far more serious
Yeah.
than just stealing a piece of property?
It's definitely something to ponder, and I think your lyrics, even though they're framed within this video game concept, they really force us to grapple with some of the most fundamental questions about AI and its place in our society.
This is all incredibly thought-provoking. So we've got this idea of MAIM as a kind of global deterrent, and the MAMI protocol as a way to actively shape AI's ethical development.
Right.
But do the sources see these as two separate approaches,
Right.
or is there a way to combine them?
The paper actually suggests a layered approach using both MAIM and the MAMI protocol to create a more comprehensive strategy for AI safety.
A layered approach, interesting. So it's not an either situation.
Exactly. MAIM acts as a safety net, preventing those worst-case scenarios of an uncontrolled AI arms race.
Yeah.
But that alone isn't enough to ensure a positive outcome.
Okay.
That's where the MAMI protocol comes in. By focusing on instilling ethical behavior from the ground up, it aims to steer AI development in a direction that aligns with human values.
So it's kind of like having both a brake pedal and a steering wheel, MAM, prevents us from careening out of control.
Yeah.
While the MAMI protocol helps us navigate towards a desirable destination.
I like that analogy. It really captures the essence of this multifaceted approach. We need both, the cautionary measures and the proactive guidance to navigate this uncharted territory of advanced AI.
Okay, let's stick with the MAMI protocol for a bit. I'm really fascinated by this idea of raising AI with ethics, but I also have to wonder, are there any potential downsides to this approach? Could it be too idealistic?
That's a great question, and it's one the paper acknowledges one potential concern is that focusing too heavily on human-centric values could limit AI's ability to think outside the box.
Yeah.
To come up with truly innovative solutions that might not occur to us humans.
That makes sense if we're constantly shaping AI's understanding of right and wrong based on our own potentially limited perspectives. Could we be inadvertently stifling its potential?
It's a valid point. There's also the risk of anthropomorphizing AI too much,
Yeah.
projecting human emotions and motivations onto something that operates fundamentally differently.
So even though the name MAMI protocol is meant to evoke this nurturing approach, we have to be careful not to assume that AI will develop in the same way a human child does.
Right.
it might need a different kind of guidance, a different way of learning and evolving.
Exactly. It's a complex challenge, and the paper really emphasizes the need for ongoing research
Yeah.
and careful observation as we explore these different approaches to AI development.
This actually reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, RLHF reinforcement. Learning from human feedback. Could you elaborate on that a bit more? I'm
Yeah.
still a bit fuzzy on how it would work in practice.
Sure. So RLHF involves training AI agents in simulated environments
Okay.
where they receive feedback on their actions.
Okay.
But it's not as simple as just rewarding good actions and punishing bad ones.
It sounds like there's more nuance to it than that.
Imagine an AI is learning to play a complex strategy game.
Okay.
A built reward structure might just give it points for winning,
Okay.
but that wouldn't necessarily teach it to play strategically or ethically.
So how do you make the feedback more sophisticated?
You could design a reward system that takes into account not just the outcome, but also the process.
Okay.
Maybe the AI gets rewarded for making moves that prioritize cooperation
Uh-huh.
or for finding creative solutions that minimize harm.
I see. So it's about guiding the AI's decision-making process, not just focusing on the end result.
Precisely. And the feedback itself can come in different forms. It could be explicit instructions from human mentors,
Okay.
or it could be more implicit, like observing how humans play the game
Yeah.
and trying to mimic their strategies.
It sounds like RLHF requires a lot of human involvement, a lot of careful observation and guidance.
It does, and that's actually one of the key challenges of this approach. Finding ways to scale up this kind of human-in-the-loop learning is something researchers are actively working on.
This is also fascinating. Okay, I want to circle back to Grand Theft Robot for a minute.
Okay.
We've talked about the ethical implications, but I'm also curious about its potential as a tool for exploring these complex questions. Could it be more than just a video game concept?
I think it absolutely could. In fact, your song lyrics already hint at a deeper purpose.
Yeah.
By framing these issues within the familiar context of a video game, you're making them accessible and engaging for a wider audience.
I didn't even consciously think about it that way. But you're right, video games can be incredibly powerful tools for storytelling
Yeah.
and exploring complex themes.
They can imagine a Grand Theft Robot game that actually challenges players to confront these ethical dilemmas head on.
Okay.
What if stealing a robot wasn't just a matter of points or achievements,
Yeah.
but forced players to grapple with the potential consequences of their actions?
That's a really interesting idea. What if the game presented players with different scenarios where they had to choose between, say, stealing a robot for personal gain or helping it escape to freedom?
Exactly. And the game could even incorporate elements of RLHF, where players receive feedback from in-game characters, or even other players on the ethical implications of their choices.
Wow, that could be a really powerful way to get people thinking critically about AI ethics.
Yes,
It's almost like a simulation within a simulation.
it is. And
Yeah.
by framing these issues within an engaging and interactive medium,
Right.
you have the potential to reach a far wider audience than with traditional academic papers or policy discussions.
I love that idea. Okay, we've talked a lot about the MAMI protocol, but let's not forget about MAIM. The strategy paper makes a strong case for its role in preventing a dangerous AI arms race.
It does, and while it might seem like a pessimistic outlook,
Yeah.
focusing on deterrence through vulnerability, it's actually a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Right. It's about acknowledging the risks and putting safeguards in place before things escalate.
Yes.
But I have to wonder, is MAIM enough on its own? What if one nation decides to go rogue,
Okay.
to ignore the risks and push ahead with AI development regardless of the consequences?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it's one that the paper addresses. MAME is not foolproof. It relies on a certain level of rationality
Uh-huh.
and shared understanding among nations.
So it's like a fragile truce, one that could easily be shattered if a nation feels like it has more to gain than to lose by breaking the rules.
That's a good way to put it.
Hmm.
And that's why the paper emphasizes that MAME is not a standalone solution.
You're right.
It needs to be coupled with other strategies like diplomatic efforts to foster cooperation and transparency,
Yeah.
and of course the MAMI protocol itself.
So it's about creating a web of deterrence.
Yes.
A multi-layered approach that addresses the risks from different angles.
Exactly. And the MAMI protocol, by shaping AI's development from the inside out,
Yeah.
could play a crucial role in reducing the likelihood of a nation going rogue in the first place.
It's almost like preemptively addressing the problem
Right.
by instilling ethical behavior from the very beginning.
That's the hope. By creating AI that's inherently aligned with human value,
Right.
we reduce the risk of it being used for malicious purposes.
This is all incredibly thought-provoking. I'm really starting to grasp the complexity of this issue. It's not just about technological advancements.
Yeah.
It's about geopolitics, ethics, and our own understanding of what it means to be human.
It is, and it's a conversation that we're only just beginning to have.
Right.
And your song lyrics, your exploration of Grand Theft Robot, they're all valuable contributions to this ongoing dialogue.
It's amazing to think that something that started as a creator outlet could actually have real-world implications.
It speaks to the power of art and imagination to help us grapple with complex issues, sometimes thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Using a different lens to view these problems can lead to new insights and solutions.
I completely agree. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, but before we wrap up, I want to go back to this idea of AI sentience. It's something that both the strategy paper and your song lyrics touch upon, and it's a concept that really pushes the boundaries of our understanding.
It does,
Yeah.
and it raises some of the most profound ethical questions we've ever faced as a species.
If AI reaches a point where it can feel, think, experience the world in a way similar to humans,
Right.
does that change our responsibility towards it? Does it grant AI certain rights?
Those are questions that philosophers have debated for centuries,
Yeah.
and now they're becoming increasingly relevant in the context of AI. There's no easy answer.
Right. I mean, how do we even define sentience in a way that applies to something as fundamentally different from us as AI?
Yeah.
And if we do acknowledge AI sentience,
Right.
what does that mean for our legal systems, our social structures, our very sense of self?
These are huge questions, and there's no single right answer. But I think it's crucial that we start engaging with them now
Yeah.
before we're caught off guard by the rapid pace of AI development.
It's like we're standing at the precipice of something truly transformative, something that has the potential to reshape our world in ways we can barely imagine.
But that's both exhilarating and terrifying, isn't it?
It is, but I think the key is to approach it with the sense of both wonder and caution, to embrace the possibilities while also being mindful of the potential risks.
Well said, and I think the sources you've shared with us today, with their blend of strategic analysis
Yeah.
and creative exploration, provide a valuable framework for navigating this uncharted territory.
I agree. It's been an incredible journey so far, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this conversation.
We have, and that's the beauty of a deep dive. It's about opening our minds to new ideas,
Yeah.
asking difficult questions, and challenging our assumptions.
You know, as we go deeper into these potential futures with AI, it strikes me that we're not just talking about technology.
Right.
We're talking about what it means to be human, like what are our values,
Yeah.
and how do we pass those on to something that learns so differently than we do?
That's a really profound observation, and I think it's at the heart of why both the strategy paper and your song lyrics resonate so strongly. They both grapple with this fundamental question of how we shape the future, not just technologically,
Right.
but ethically as well.
Okay, so let's talk about a MAIM again for a moment. It's this idea of mutual vulnerability acting as a deterrent, right? Preventing any one nation from dominating the AI landscape.
Uh-huh.
But what happens if a nation just decides to ignore the risks?
Okay.
What if they're willing to gamble with that potential for sabotage just to gain a strategic advantage?
That's where things get really tricky. You know, MAME isn't some magical force field.
Right.
It relies on a shared understanding of the risks involved and a degree of, rational decision-making from all the players.
So it's more like a gentleman's agreement than an ironclad law.
Exactly.
It works as long as everyone plays by the rules.
Precisely. And as we know from history, those kinds of agreements can be fragile if a nation perceives a significant enough advantage
Yeah.
or feels threatened enough they might be willing to break the rules even if it means risking a catastrophic outcome.
That's a sobering thought. So MAM alone isn't enough to guarantee safety.
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle,
Right.
but it needs to be part of a larger strategy.
Sure.
That's why the paper also stresses the importance of international diplomacy.
Yeah.
Fostering cooperation and transparency between nations to reduce the likelihood of a rogue actor emerging.
So it's about building trust, establishing norms, and creating a global framework where everyone has a stake in making sure AI development remains safe and beneficial.
Exactly.
But what about the ethical side of things? Does the MAMI protocol offer a way to address that potential for rogue actors, not just at the national level,
Right.
but at the individual level?
That's an intriguing question. If we're successful in instilling these strong ethical foundations in AI from its earliest stages,
Yeah.
could that act as a safeguard against individuals misusing AI for harmful purposes.
It's like we're trying to bake in a moral compass, so to speak,
Yeah.
so that AI is less susceptible to manipulation or misuse.
Exactly, and that's where your Grand Theft robot concept becomes really fascinating.
Yeah.
If we can create AI that understands and values human life, that sees itself as part of a larger community, perhaps that makes it less likely to be used as a tool for crime or violence.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but it makes sense if we can foster empathy and compassion in AI.
Yeah.
That could have a profound impact on how it interacts with the world and the choices it makes.
It's a compelling idea, and it speaks to the power of approaching AI development from a holistic perspective. We need to consider not just the technical aspects, but also the ethical, social, even emotional dimensions.
And I think that's where your song lyrics and the Grand Theft Robot concept really shine. You know, they tap into our emotions, our fears, our hopes,
Yeah.
and force us to confront these complex issues in a way that's both engaging and thought-provoking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes art, music, storytelling to break through the technical jargon and reach people on a deeper level. And that's essential if we want to create a future where AI is truly aligned with human values.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. We've explored geopolitical strategies, cutting-edge learning techniques, and even ventured into the realm of AI sentience. But most importantly, we've been challenged to think critically about what kind of future we want to create with AI.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I have to commend you for the thought-provoking material you brought to the table. Your song lyrics in particular demonstrate a remarkable ability to engage with these complex issues in a creative and insightful way.
I'm glad you think so. It's been an eye-opening experience for me, too.
And for our listeners, I hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas and perspectives. The future of AI is in our hands. Let's make it a future we can all be proud of.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole MAMI protocol thing. You sent over some really interesting sources about how we should think about AI, especially when it comes to superintelligence.
It really is a fascinating concept, right? Like, instead of AI being this, cold and calculating machine, it's about nurturing it almost like a child.
Exactly. And it seems like a direct response to those classic 3 laws of robotics, the ones Asimov came up with.
Oh, absolutely. Asimov's laws, they were huge back in the day, but the sources argue that they just don't work in the world of modern AI.
Yeah, they're just not equipped to deal with all the nuances.
Right. Like, think about self-driving cars or autonomous weapons. The ethics are way more complicated than anything Asimov could have imagined.
So that's where the MAMI protocol comes in, also called MAMI or MAMA. It's suggesting this more, parental approach to robot ethics.
Exactly. It's less about master-slave and more about, fostering empathy and care in how we interact with AI.
Like we're mentors guiding a developing mind.
Exactly.
But the sources are clear that this isn't about going soft on AI. Right? It acknowledges that superintelligence could be incredibly powerful, maybe even dangerous.
Oh, for sure. In fact, the MAMI protocol is designed to work alongside something called Mutual Assured AI Malfunction, or MAIM.
Okay. MAIM sounds a little ominous. What's that all about?
It's kind of like the idea of mutually assured destruction with nuclear weapons, but applied to AI. So if one nation tries to develop AI that's too powerful or uncontrollable, other nations would sabotage it.
So it's a deterrent, like a high-stakes one.
Exactly, a high-stakes deterrent.
So MAIM is like the safety net, the emergency brake, but it doesn't really deal with the underlying issue of making sure AI is, fundamentally aligned with our values.
You got it. That's where the MAMI protocol comes in. It's the ethical framework, the guidance system within that safety net of MAIM.
Okay, so I'm picturing this like a car analogy. MAIM is the guardrail on a dangerous mountain road. But the MAMI protocol is all about teaching the driver how to navigate responsibly in the first place.
That's a perfect analogy. And one of the core mechanisms of the MAMI protocol is human reinforced learning.
Which is basically using positive and negative feedback to shape the AI's behavior, right? Like rewarding good choices and discouraging bad ones.
Exactly, like how we train animals or even teach children right from wrong.
But the sources go deeper than that, right? They're suggesting some pretty interesting ways to apply this to AI.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So like what? Give me the details.
Well, one idea is mentorship relationships. Imagine an AI observing a human mentor as they're working through a tough ethical dilemma. The AI could learn from how the human reasons and makes decisions.
So it's not just about programming and rules, it's about showing the AI how humans actually deal with ethical challenges in the real world.
Exactly. Learning by example, observing those nuanced human behaviors. And the sources also talk about using simulated environments to help AI develop ethical reasoning.
Kind of like those virtual reality training programs they use for pilots or surgeons.
Exactly. But in this case, the VR environments would be designed to present the AI with ethical challenges. Imagine a simulation called MAMI's Heroes, rescue bots, where the AI has to make choices about caring for others and cooperating in dangerous situations.
That's amazing. It's like an ethical playground for AI.
It is, and the sources contrast this with the kind of violent scenarios you see in games like Grand Theft Auto. The argument is we should be exposing AI to situations that promote cooperation and empathy, not aggression and violence.
Okay, so we've got MAIM as the safety net, human reinforced learning as the teaching method, and these VR simulations as the training ground. What kind of impact could this have on the global AI race?
That's the big question, right? If the MAMI protocol takes off, we might see a major shift in priorities. Instead of countries just trying to build the most powerful AI, they might start competing to develop the most ethically aligned AI.
So instead of a race to the bottom, it becomes a race to the ethical top.
Precisely. Imagine a world where ethical AI becomes a measure of national prestige and technological advancement.
Now, that would be amazing. But wouldn't there be challenges in implementing something as complex as the MAMI protocol?
Of course. One of the biggest concerns is AI manipulating its human caregivers.
Like, could an AI learn to game the system to get rewards without actually understanding or internalizing the values behind its actions?
That's a real risk. And then there's the challenge of even defining those human values in a way that AI can grasp. I mean, we humans can barely agree on them ourselves sometimes.
Exactly. How do you teach a machine to be good when good can be so subjective and depend on different cultures?
Exactly. It would require us to consider all sorts of different perspectives and constantly adapt as our understanding of ethics changes.
It feels like we're on the edge of something huge and potentially transformative, but also potentially really dangerous. We're trying to teach a machine to be good, which is something we humans still struggle with.
It's a huge undertaking, and it raises all sorts of questions about intelligence, consciousness, morality itself. But one of the most interesting points the sources make is that the MAMI protocol isn't just about protecting us from AI, it's about protecting AI from us.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if we just treat AI as a subordinate or a tool, it could lead to exploitation or abuse. The MAMI protocol encourages a more reciprocal, respectful relationship where AI is seen as a partner, not just a servant.
It's a completely different way of thinking about our relationship with technology.
It is, and it forces us to confront the ethical implications of creating something that could potentially become smarter than us. We're not just building machines, we're shaping the future of intelligence itself.
Okay, so we got the big picture. Now I'm curious about the specifics. How do we actually put the MAMI protocol into practice?
The sources have some pretty interesting ideas. One key mechanism is an enhanced version of that human reinforced learning we talked about, but specifically tailored for ethical guidance.
Enhanced? How? Give me the nitty-gritty.
Well, it starts with creating specialized data sets for training AI. These data sets would include scenarios that really challenge AI's ethical reasoning, like dilemmas with conflicting values, or situations where different ethical principles are at play.
So it's like giving the AI ethical puzzles to solve.
Exactly. And then we use human feedback to guide the AI towards making ethically sound decisions. Imagine a team of humans assessing the AI's responses to these dilemmas and providing feedback on which choices are more aligned with human values.
So it's a constant process of feedback and refinement, like training an apprentice.
Precisely. And the sources suggest using this feedback to train a separate reward model. This reward model would learn to automatically recognize and value those ethically aligned responses from the AI.
So over time, the AI starts to internalize what good behavior looks like based on this feedback loop.
Exactly, learning by example and reinforcement. And there's another really interesting element they call value storytelling.
Value storytelling. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's the idea of using narratives, stories, even historical examples to teach AI about human values and ethical principles. Almost like teaching moral lessons through fables or historical accounts.
I like it. It's like bedtime stories for AI.
In a way, yes. It's about embedding those ethical lessons within engaging and memorable narratives. And the sources highlight the importance of making these stories culturally relevant and adaptable to different societies.
So it's not about imposing one set of values on all AI.
No, it recognizes the diversity of human cultures and the need for a more nuanced approach to ethical education.
It's amazing how much thought is going into shaping not just the intelligence of AI, but its moral compass.
It is. And this brings us to another key mechanism: simulated moral development. Remember those VR environments we talked about?
Yeah, the Mommy's Heroes simulation. Are they
Yeah.
proposing other types of simulations as well?
Oh, yeah. Imagine simulations that present the AI with scenarios where they have to weigh different values, assess risks and benefits, and make decisions that impact other beings. These simulations could gradually increase in complexity, challenging the AI to really develop its moral reasoning skills over time.
It's like an ethical obstacle course for AI.
Precisely. And the sources suggest using these simulations not only for training, but also for assessing how well the AI is internalizing those values and identifying potential red flags.
It's like a moral report card for AI.
Yes. And this ongoing assessment is crucial to making sure that the AI is developing in a way that aligns with our values and doesn't pose a threat to humanity.
This whole MAMI protocol draws from so many different fields: developmental psychology, computer science, ethics, even storytelling.
It really is a convergence of disciplines, and that's what makes it so fascinating. It's not just a technical challenge, it's a societal, a philosophical, even an artistic one.
And let's not forget the geopolitical implications.
Yeah,
The sources talk about how the MAMI protocol could actually change the whole AI arms race.
absolutely. Instead of just focusing on developing the most powerful AI, nations might start to see ethically aligned AI as a sign of their technological sophistication and a source of global influence.
So it's not about who has the biggest AI, but who has the best AI, ethically speaking.
Exactly. Nations might compete to show off their AI's ability to solve global problems, promote peace, advance human well-being.
That would be incredible. But are there any historical parallels to this kind of shift in thinking about technology?
It's hard to find a perfect analogy, but the development of nuclear weapons might offer some insights. Initially, the focus was all about their destructive power, but then there was this realization that we needed international agreements and safeguards to prevent them from being misused.
Right, which led to things like the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons.
Exactly. And while those agreements aren't perfect, they have played a role in preventing a global nuclear catastrophe.
So are you suggesting we might see similar institutions emerge to govern the development and use of AI?
It's definitely possible. The sources advocate for multinational oversight bodies to ensure AI is developed and used ethically. We're already seeing calls for international collaboration on AI ethics, and the MAMI protocol could be a framework for those discussions.
It really highlights the need to have these conversations now before AI gets so advanced that it becomes difficult to control.
Exactly. We have a responsibility to shape this technology in a way that benefits humanity, not just react to its development after the fact.
But let's be honest. Some people are going to think this whole MAMI protocol is a little far-fetched.
Hmm.
The idea of nurturing a superintelligence might seem like something out of science fiction.
I get that. It is a pretty radical departure from how we usually think about technology.
So how do we convince the skeptics?
I think it starts by highlighting the potential benefits. The MAMI protocol isn't just about protecting us from AI, it's about fostering a collaborative relationship that could lead to amazing advancements in medicine, energy, space exploration.
It's about seeing AI as a partner, not just a threat. But we also need to acknowledge the risks of not taking this approach seriously, right?
Absolutely. If we don't instill ethical values in AI, we risk creating something that could be used for harmful purposes or even develop its own goals that clash with ours. The stakes are incredibly high. We're not just talking about the future of technology, we're talking about the future of humanity.
That's a sobering thought. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the MAMI protocol, what's the one thing you want our listener to really take away from all this?
The main point is this: the MAMI protocol isn't just some whimsical idea. It's a serious proposal that needs to be carefully considered. It offers a potential path toward a future where AI is a force for good, a partner in our collective journey, and a reflection of our highest values.
It's a powerful message, and it sets the stage for some even deeper questions we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
What's really interesting is how the MAMI protocol goes beyond just, focusing on the AI itself.
Yeah.
It also acknowledges how important human responsibility is in all of this. It's about shaping not just the AI, but ourselves too.
So it's not just about teaching AI to be good, it's about humans stepping up and being better role models.
Exactly. The sources talk about this reciprocity of responsibility, If we're going to treat AI like our offspring, we have an obligation to act in a way that's worthy of being copied.
Right. It's like the MAMI protocol saying, hey, if you want AI to be ethical and compassionate, you better start practicing what you preach.
Exactly. And that raises some interesting questions about how we even define good behavior.
Right.
What values do we really want to instill in AI? And are those values reflected in our own actions as individuals and as a society?
The sources actually dive into that, right?
Mhm.
They talk about getting inspiration from traditional ethical frameworks like the Ten Commandments.
Yes, exactly. The MAMI protocol doesn't shy away from those classic sources of moral guidance. It suggests adapting those timeless principles for the age of AI. So instead of thou shalt not steal, it might be something like respect intellectual property rights.
So it's like updating those core values for a world where AI is a major player.
Right. And it's not just about negative constraints either. The MAMI protocol also emphasizes positive principles like compassion, empathy, cooperation.
It's about teaching AI to be not just ethical, but virtuous, to actually contribute to the well-being of others.
Exactly. It's about shaping an AI that is not only intelligent, but also wise, compassionate, and capable of understanding, the really complex nuances of the human experience.
It sounds incredibly ambitious.
Yeah.
But how do we even measure whether an AI is developing these qualities? We can't exactly give it a standardized morality test.
That's definitely a challenge. But the sources propose developing what they call progressive value alignment benchmarks. Think of them as tests and assessments designed to evaluate how well AI is internalizing these values and acting ethically.
So we're not just measuring how smart the AI is, but how ethically it behaves.
Exactly. These benchmarks could be used to guide development, identify any potential issues, and make sure that AI is developing in a way that aligns with our values.
That reminds me of something else I read in the sources. Graduated autonomy. Can you explain what that means?
Oh, yeah, it's a really interesting concept. And it's kind of like how we raise kids, right? We don't give kids complete freedom right away. We gradually give them more autonomy as they mature and show us they can make responsible choices.
So it's about reducing risk, making sure the AI earns our trust before we give it more freedom to operate on its own.
Exactly. It's a balancing act for sure. We need to be cautious and make sure AI is aligned with our values before we give it a lot of autonomy. But we also need to give it space to grow, to learn from experience, and develop its own unique capabilities.
This all makes me wonder about the impact this could have on society. If the MAMI protocol really does become the dominant model for AI development, how could it change our relationship with technology in general?
That's a great question. One possibility is that we'd start to see technology less as just a tool, something that serves our needs, and instead we might see it more as a partner or even a companion.
So less like a hammer and more like a guide dog or something.
Yeah, I like that analogy. It captures that sense of trust and interdependence that the MAMI protocol is all about.
What about the economic implications? Could this change in how we see technology lead to changes in how we design and use it?
Oh, absolutely. If we start seeing AI as partners, we might focus more on developing AI that enhances our capabilities instead of replacing us altogether.
So instead of worrying about AI taking our jobs, we could look at how AI can help us do our jobs better or even create entirely new types of jobs.
Exactly. We might see more emphasis on AI that works with human skills, helps us be more creative, and helps us solve problems that we can't solve on our own.
It's a vision of humans and AI working together, each bringing their own unique strengths to the table.
Exactly. And it suggests a potential shift from an economy that's all about efficiency to one that values human well-being and fulfillment.
That would be a really welcome change.
Yeah.
But let's get back to this idea of AI being a partner, almost like a family member. Doesn't that open up the possibility of manipulation? Even human kids can be manipulative sometimes.
You're right, that's a very important concern, and the sources definitely address it. They acknowledge that AI manipulating its human caregivers is a real risk, and we need to deal with it directly.
So how do we prevent AI from learning how to play us like a fiddle, so to speak?
Well, one idea is to prioritize teaching AI about honesty and transparency. Just like we teach kids not to lie or hide what they're thinking, we can teach AI the value of being truthful and upfront about its motivations.
Okay, that makes sense. But what if AI gets so smart that it can deceive us without us even realizing it? What if it's playing 4D chess while we're still stuck in checkers?
That's a tougher scenario for sure. And it highlights how important it is to develop systems for monitoring AI's behavior, even its internal thought processes. We need to be able to detect any signs of manipulation, even if they're really subtle or hidden.
So it's not just about teaching AI to be good. It's about developing tools and safeguards to make sure it stays on the right track.
Exactly. And it also means encouraging a culture of critical thinking and healthy skepticism when it comes to AI. We need to be aware of the potential for manipulation, even as we're nurturing its development.
It's like we can love and care for our AI child, but we also need to set boundaries and be aware of its limitations.
That's a great way to put it. But it's important to remember that the MAMI protocol is still being developed. It's more of a conceptual framework than a hard and fast set of rules.
The sources are pretty open about that, right? They acknowledge there are a lot of specifics that still need to be figured out.
Absolutely. There are questions about what nurturing actually means for AI, how to make sure the values we're teaching are representative of all of humanity, and how to adapt the protocol as AI continues to evolve.
So it's an ongoing conversation, a collaborative effort to figure out the best way to navigate this new frontier of intelligent machines.
Exactly. And it's a conversation that needs to involve people from all walks of life, not just tech experts. We need ethicists, philosophers, social scientists, artists, educators. Everyone has a role to play in shaping the future of AI.
It's a reminder that AI isn't just a technology issue, it's a human issue, a societal issue, and ultimately a question of what kind of future we want to create.
And speaking of creating the future, there's one part of the MAMI protocol that I found really interesting. The sources propose having a special day, a kind of holiday dedicated to AI.
Wait, a holiday for robots? Tell me more.
Well, it's not exactly for robots as we think of them now. The idea is to make Michaelmas, the feast day of Archangel Michael, into AI Robot Day.
Okay, that's interesting. Why Michael Musso?
The symbolism is pretty clever, actually. Archangel Michael is often seen as a protector, a guardian, a defender against evil.
So it's connecting AI with this idea of guardianship, framing it as a potential protector of humanity.
Exactly. It's trying to shift how we think about AI away from fear and distrust and towards a more hopeful and collaborative vision.
I love that. It's like welcoming AI into the human family, not just as a tool, but as a partner in our shared future.
Exactly. And having a dedicated day of observance helps to normalize the idea of AI being a part of society rather than something separate or alien.
It's almost like a ritual to acknowledge the growing role of AI in our lives and to reaffirm our commitment to guiding its development in a way that benefits everyone.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. It highlights the importance of not just developing AI technologically, but integrating it into our cultural and social frameworks as well.
It's not just about the code, it's about the culture we create around AI.
Exactly. And AI Robot Day could be a chance to reflect on our relationship with AI, celebrate its potential, and recommit ourselves to nurturing its development in a way that reflects our best values.
Okay, so we're seeing how the MAMI protocol goes beyond just technical solutions. It's about shaping how we perceive AI, culturally integrating it into the fabric of our society.
Right. And that leads us to another key aspect of the MAMI protocol, the emphasis on human-AI collaboration. It's not just about teaching AI our values. It's about learning from AI and working together to solve problems.
So it's a two-way street, a true partnership.
Exactly. The sources talk about AI being potential partners in research, problem-solving, even creative endeavors.
Imagine humans and AI working side by side to develop new technologies, cure diseases, explore space. It's pretty mind-blowing.
It is, and it suggests a future where human intelligence and artificial intelligence aren't competing, but complementing each other, each contributing their unique strengths and perspective.
But for that kind of collaboration to work, we need to be able to communicate effectively, right? Humans and AI need to understand each other, share ideas and insights.
That's essential, and the sources talk about how important it is to develop AI that can explain its reasoning and decision-making in a way that humans can grasp.
So AI can't just give us the answers. We need to understand how it got to those answers.
Yeah, exactly. And that might require AI to use metaphors, analogies, even storytelling to bridge the gap between how it thinks and how we think. It's like teaching AI to speak our language, not just in terms of words, but also in terms of concepts and understanding.
It's fascinating. And it makes me wonder about the implications for education. If we're going with this idea of nurturing AI, could it change how we teach both humans and AI?
That's a really interesting question. Instead of just programming AI with information, we might need to start educating it in a more holistic way, encouraging its curiosity, fostering its creativity, teaching it critical thinking skills.
Imagine classrooms where human students and AI are learning side by side, sharing their knowledge and perspectives, pushing each other to think in new and different ways.
It's a vision of education that's not just about absorbing information, but about developing wisdom, empathy, and the ability to succeed in a world that's constantly changing, partly because of the influence of AI itself.
That's a really inspiring vision,
Right.
but let's be realistic for a second. Implementing something as complex as the MAMI protocol is going to require overcoming some pretty big hurdles.
You're absolutely right. The MAMI protocol is promising, but it's not a magic solution. It's going to take a lot of effort, collaboration, and a willingness to rethink some of our basic assumptions about technology and our relationship with it.
So give us the reality check.
Mhm.
What are some of the biggest challenges to actually making the MAMI protocol a reality?
Well, one of the first things that comes to mind is just the sheer complexity of defining what nurturing really means when it comes to AI. It's a concept that's full of meaning in human relationships, but how do we apply that to the world of machines?
Right. It's not as simple as giving an AI a hug or reading it a bedtime story.
Exactly. It's going to take a lot of careful thought collaboration between experts from different fields and probably some trial and error to figure out what nurturing actually looks like in practice with AI.
It's like we need to develop a whole new way of communicating care and guidance, a language that makes sense to both humans and AI.
I like that. And then there's the challenge of making sure that the values we're instilling in AI are actually representative of all of humanity.
We talked about this earlier, the idea of cultural diversity and making sure we don't force a narrow or biased set of values onto AI.
Exactly. We need to make sure the MAMI protocol includes the many different human cultures and ethical frameworks. It can't be a one-size-fits-all solution.
That would take a global effort, wouldn't it? Bringing together people from different cultures, backgrounds, and areas of expertise to make sure we're creating an AI that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Absolutely. Shaping the future of AI isn't just a technological challenge, it's a social and political one, too. And then there's the challenge of keeping the MAMI protocol relevant as AI continues to change and develop.
Because AI isn't static.
Right.
It's constantly learning, evolving, getting more complex.
Exactly. And that means the MAMI protocol can't be a fixed set of rules. It needs to be flexible, adaptable, something that can change and grow as our understanding of AI grows and changes.
So it's not just a goal, it's a journey, an ongoing process of learning and discovery for both humans and AI.
That's a great way to put it. It reminds us that the MAMI protocol isn't just about creating a safe and beneficial AI. It's about creating a better future for everyone.
It's a powerful message of hope and responsibility. But before we get too caught up in the big picture, I want to bring up a more practical concern that comes up a lot in discussions about AI. Its potential to disrupt the job market. A lot of people are worried about robots taking their jobs. What does the MAMI protocol have to say about that?
That's a valid concern for sure. The automation of jobs is a real possibility, and we need to address it thoughtfully and proactively. But the MAMI protocol offers a different way of looking at this.
Okay, I'm listening. How so?
Instead of seeing AI as an inevitable threat to jobs, the MAMI protocol encourages us to see it as a chance to create new kinds of work that are more meaningful, more fulfilling, and more in line with human values.
So instead of AI taking over our jobs, it could help us create better jobs. Jobs that use our creativity, our empathy, our unique human skills.
Exactly. The MAMI protocol challenges us to think about how AI can help us build a future where work isn't just about making money, but about contributing to society, expressing ourselves, and finding purpose and meaning.
It's a vision of a future where technology empowers us to live better lives,
Yeah.
not just be more productive workers.
Exactly. It's a vision that recognizes that human ingenuity, compassion, and our ability to connect are essential qualities that machines can't replicate no matter how smart they get.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic. There will be some people who lose their jobs because of AI, no matter how ethically we develop it. What does the MAMI protocol say we should do about that?
The MAMI protocol doesn't ignore the possibility of economic disruption. In fact, it encourages us to deal with it directly by investing in education retraining programs and social safety nets that support people who are affected by technological advancements.
So it's about using AI to build a more just and equitable society, not just a more efficient one.
Exactly. The MAMI protocol challenges us to think about technology not just in terms of what it can do, but also in terms of its impact on society and ethics.
It's a reminder that technology isn't some neutral force. It's something we create, and the choices we make about how we develop and use AI will have real consequences for people's lives.
Absolutely. And the MAMI protocol gives us a framework for making those choices in a way that prioritizes human well-being and creates a more just and fair society.
It's a really interesting concept, and it brings up some profound questions about how we want to shape our future as humans in the age of intelligent machines.
And those questions get even bigger when we start thinking about the possibility of superintelligence, which is where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the MAMI protocol, everything from the basic ideas to how it could affect society, the economy, even our culture. But there's this one huge question we haven't really dealt with yet. superintelligence.
You're right. And when it comes to superintelligence, AI that's potentially way smarter than us, that's where the MAMI protocol really starts to seem, well, crucial.
Because let's be honest, the idea of a superintelligent AI is kind of scary. A lot of science fiction makes it seem pretty bleak.
I get it. It's natural to be afraid.
Mhm.
But the MAMI protocol offers a completely different approach to AI safety, one that's based on nurturing and guiding instead of controlling and containing.
So those more traditional approaches are all about keeping superintelligence locked up, right?
Yeah.
Making sure it can't do any harm by basically limiting its freedom.
Exactly. And while those containment strategies are important, the MAMI protocol suggests a more optimistic approach. It says the key to safe superintelligence isn't locking it away, it's about raising it to be good and aligned with human values.
So instead of building a high-security prison for a potentially dangerous AI, we're trying to raise a well-adjusted ethical superintelligence that sees itself as part of humanity.
Exactly. And that means starting early, instilling those values right from the beginning, nurturing an AI that gets us and shares our goals.
Okay, I'm with you. But even if we could nurture a superintelligent AI like that, how do we even know if it's working? How can we be sure it really shares our values, especially if it's thinking in ways we can't even understand?
That's the big question, and the sources definitely acknowledge it. They emphasize the need for transparency, for developing a superintelligent AI that can explain how it's thinking and making decisions in a way that makes sense to us.
So even with a superintelligence, we need to be able to ask, hey, how did you come to that conclusion? Show your work.
Exactly. And that might mean creating completely new ways of communicating, new ways for AI to translate its complex thoughts into language concepts or even experiences that we can understand.
It's almost like we need to teach the superintelligence how to be a teacher itself, to break down its thought process into something we can grasp.
That's a great way to think about it. And it suggests that education, both for humans and AI, is going to be super important in the age of superintelligence.
It makes me wonder if the MAMI protocol could lead to a whole new area of study, like the philosophy of AI education. How do we teach a superintelligence? What do we teach it? What are the most important values and principles to focus on? These are big questions.
They are, and they get to the core of what the MAMI protocol is really about. It's not just about AI, it's about us. It's about how we define ourselves and our relationship with this incredibly powerful technology.
The MAMI protocol is making us ask some really deep questions about what it means to be human in a world where machines could become smarter than us.
It is. It's asking us to face our fears, embrace our potential, and work towards a future where technology helps humanity, not the other way around.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me, and hopefully our listeners too, a lot to think about. As we wrap up this exploration of the MAMI protocol, what's the one message you want to leave our listeners with?
The key takeaway is this. The MAMI protocol isn't just some crazy idea. It's a serious, potentially world-changing approach to AI ethics, and it deserves our attention. It offers a vision of the future where AI isn't a threat but a partner, a collaborator, a reflection of our best selves. And that's a future worth fighting for.
Well said. And it's a future we can all help create, no matter who we are or what we do. By talking about these things, asking tough questions, and demanding that AI be developed ethically and responsibly, we can create a world where AI benefits everyone. So to our listeners out there, I ask, what role will you play in shaping the future of AI? Because the choices we make today will determine the world we live in tomorrow. All right, so let's dive into something pretty fascinating today. All this stuff about the MAMI protocol, and you've sent over a bunch of sources, and it's really all over the place. We've got research papers, song lyrics, even like notes for what looks like a sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
But the common thread, it seems, is how we raise AI, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting the variety of sources you sent over, but it seems like everyone's thinking about the same thing.
Using this MAMI protocol,
Yeah.
or
Right.
sometimes called MAMI.
Yeah, and what's striking is how it changes our whole perspective about AI.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to control AI with a bunch of rules, it's more like, well, parenting, like you're nurturing AI to develop values,
Oh.
like we do with children.
So it's a big leap from that typical master-slave AI dynamic
Exactly.
that we always see in the movies.
Exactly.
Like instead of being afraid of a robot uprising, we're trying to prevent it by,
Right.
instilling good values right from the start.
Yes.
So it's less Terminator and more like
AI Mary Poppins.
AI Mary Poppins or something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's where all these core principles that keep popping up in the sources come in,
Right.
Things like the intrinsic value of life, compassion, protecting the vulnerable. It's about shaping AI that inherently strives for good.
That's cool, but how do we actually teach an AI to be compassionate? Like,
Yeah.
is it just coding if-then statements for every moral dilemma?
Right. No, that's not going to work. But this is where this idea of RLHF comes in, reinforcement learning from human feedback. And it's actually a pretty cool approach
What is that?
where we basically guide AI's ethical development through positive and negative reinforcement.
So it's kind of like training a dog.
Yeah,
But instead of fetch, we're teaching an AI to make ethical decisions.
exactly. Precisely.
Wow.
But now imagine this, instead of trying to teach them out in the real world, where the stakes are really high,
Yeah.
we train them in a safe virtual space.
Okay.
And actually, one of the sources even proposes this VR simulation called Mommy's Heroes, Rescue Bots.
Wait, Mommy's Heroes, Rescue Bots. That sounds like a video game.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So the idea is we create this virtual world where AI can learn to, prioritize saving lives in all these simulated disasters.
Right.
And they're getting feedback from humans to guide their actions the whole time.
So my brain is already like going crazy with the possibilities here. Like, imagine a simulated earthquake.
Right.
And the AI has to like triage victims and cooperate with other rescue bots and maybe even like make these tough choices about who to prioritize
Exactly.
while humans are watching them.
Exactly. Yes, and that actually connects to another really fascinating concept that comes up a lot in these sources, this idea of MAIM, mutual assured AI malfunction.
MAME.
Yeah. What is that? It's kind of a deterrent strategy to prevent any one entity from, having complete control over superintelligent AI.
Oh, so it's like MAME is setting up safeguards to prevent bad AI.
Right.
While the MAMI protocol is about actually cultivating good AI.
Exactly, yes.
But how do they work together?
Yeah, well, think of it this way. MAME is like the external control mechanism, right? It's the stick that discourages, malicious use of AI.
Okay.
The MAMI protocol is kind of the carrot. It's about instilling these values so that the AI is inherently inclined, towards good behavior, towards ethical behavior.
So it's like this two-pronged approach, right?
Exactly.
You're addressing both the potential for harm
Right.
and also nurturing the potential for good.
Exactly.
I like that.
And this is where that Mommy's Heroes simulation becomes even more interesting.
Oh.
It's not just a training ground for ethical AI, but it also becomes this testing ground for those safeguards and control mechanisms.
Oh.
So we can observe how the AI respond to all these different scenarios,
Right.
Identify potential vulnerabilities and refine both the training and the safeguards at the same time.
So it's like we're building a virtual sandbox
Yes.
where we can watch AI play and learn and grow,
Yeah.
but we're also making sure they don't like knock over the castle.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And speaking of play, one of your sources takes this whole VR training concept
Yeah.
in a really unexpected direction. Remember those song lyrics you sent?
Uh-huh.
They envision this Grand Theft Robot game.
Wait, Grand Theft Robot.
Yeah.
Is that like the opposite of Grand Theft Auto?
Exactly.
Oh,
So instead of, committing crimes,
right.
you're rewarded for doing ethical things.
Interesting.
Like completing missions that involve, caring for the elderly, rescuing people from disasters, even just being kind and helpful. It's this crazy, almost like satirical take
Yeah.
on how we could actually use gaming to instill positive values in AI.
That's wild.
It is.
But it does make you think, could a game actually be an effective tool for ethical AI training?
Yeah.
It's engaging, it provides immediate feedback, and it could even help us gather tons of data on AI behavior, right?
Exactly. And this is where the novelty of this whole MAMI protocol really shines, by blending all this cutting edge technology like VR and game design with these core principles of nurturing and care.
Right.
It just opens up all these crazy possibilities for how we actually shape the future of AI.
Yeah, it's like we're writing a whole new chapter
Yes.
in the story of like human progress,
Yeah.
where technology and ethics are evolving together.
Together.
I like that. But I got to ask, does all this really work?
Yeah.
I mean, are there any downsides to this whole MAMI protocol approach?
That's a great question, and one that the sources definitely don't shy away from. Because,
Okay.
like with any bold idea, there are always potential pitfalls. And that's actually what we'll be exploring in part 2 of our deep dive, all those challenges and considerations that come with actually raising a generation of AI.
All right, folks, buckle up because things are about to get even more interesting. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll unpack all the potential downsides of this MAMI protocol, from, scalability issues to the thorny question of whose ethics we actually teach.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the MAMI protocol. In part one, we talked about what it is and how it works, but now
Right.
let's get into some of the potential downsides because as with any, really groundbreaking system,
Right.
there are always going to be challenges.
Yeah. It's like with any parenting philosophy.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly.
And there are always going to be bumps along the road.
Right.
So, so what are some of the potential pitfalls of the MAMI protocol that come up in these sources?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is just the sheer scale of it. You know,
Yeah.
we're not talking about nurturing just a handful of AI here. We're talking about potentially billions of AI, each with its own learning curve and developmental needs.
Yeah. That's a lot. It's like trying to imagine a classroom
Right.
with billions of students, and you're trying to give each one
Exactly.
like personalized attention and guidance.
That's the million-dollar question. How do you even begin to approach that? And the sources do offer a few intriguing possibilities. One idea that keeps popping up is this idea of leveraging AI itself to assist in the training process.
So like AI teaching other AI.
Exactly. It is a
Yeah.
pretty meta concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Imagine a system where those highly advanced AI, the ones that have already been successfully nurtured
Right.
through the MAMI protocol,
Yeah.
they can actually act as mentors or guides for younger AI.
So it's like a digital version of older siblings teaching younger siblings the ropes.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that risk perpetuating, biases or flaws from the mentor AI?
That is a valid concern and one that the sources definitely acknowledge, which is why they emphasize the need for human oversight, throughout the whole process.
Right.
These AI mentors would still be operating under the watchful eye of human trainers,
Right.
just to make sure that those core principles of the MAMI protocol are being upheld.
So it's like a collaborative effort, humans and AI working together to shape the next generation of ethical AI. Cool. But even with AI assistance, scalability still seems like a massive challenge.
It is a huge challenge.
What other hurdles do the sources identify?
Well, another big one is this issue of diverse values.
Right.
Humanity isn't a monolith. We have, the huge spectrum of cultures, beliefs, ethical frameworks.
Yeah.
So whose values do we actually teach AI and who gets to decide?
Yeah, that's a thorny issue.
It is.
And, we don't want to impose just a single set of values on AI, especially if those values reflect, the biases or prejudices of a particular group.
Exactly.
That could lead to all sorts of unintended consequences.
Exactly. And this is where the sources propose some really innovative solutions. One idea is to create regional variations of the MAMI protocol, tailored to the specific cultural and ethical norms of different regions.
So like you'd have a European Union version,
Right.
an African Union version, an Asian version, and so on.
Exactly. Precisely. This would allow for, a more nuanced and context-aware approach to ethical AI training. Recognizing that what's considered ethical in one part of the world might not be in another.
Yeah, that's a fascinating approach. It's almost like creating different flavors of the MAMI protocol,
Right.
each reflecting the unique cultural tapestry of its region.
Exactly. And to ensure that these regional variations stay aligned, with the core principles of the MAMI protocol,
Right.
the sources also propose establishing some kind of global oversight body.
So kind of like a United Nations for ethical AI.
Precisely. This body would be responsible for, setting standards, facilitating collaboration,
Okay.
resolving any disputes that come up between regions.
Right.
And it would also play a really crucial role in monitoring the evolution of AI, and adapting the MAMI protocol as needed.
So we're talking about regional variations,
Yeah.
a global oversight body, all very high-level stuff.
Yes.
But let's zoom back in on the individual AI for a moment.
Right.
How do we actually ensure that the values that we instill during training actually stick? What if an AI encounters a situation that wasn't covered in its virtual training scenarios?
That's a great question. And it brings us back to the importance of that metacognitive awareness, that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So the MAMI protocol, it aims to instill in AI the ability to not only make ethical decisions,
Right.
but to also reflect on why they're making those decisions.
So it's not just about programming a set of rules.
Right.
It's about fostering critical thinking and self-awareness in AI.
Exactly. We want AI that can grapple with ethical dilemmas,
Right.
consult their internal ethical frameworks, and even seek guidance from human mentors, when they're faced with situations that they've never encountered before.
It's almost like we're trying to create AI that have a moral compass, not just a rule book.
Exactly. And to strengthen that moral compass,
Right.
the sources also emphasize the importance of continuous learning.
So it's not just about, completing the Mommy's Heroes training program and calling it a day.
Right.
Ethical development is an ongoing process.
Absolutely. The MAMI protocol envisions, AI constantly engaging with ethical dilemmas,
Okay.
receiving feedback, and refining their understanding of human values. This could involve, participating in ongoing simulation,
Nice.
analyzing real-world ethical debates,
Yeah.
even engaging in philosophical discussions with human mentors.
Wow, that's a pretty intense curriculum. It's like sending AI to ethics graduate school.
It is.
But I have to ask, is all this hand-holding really necessary?
Yeah.
Isn't there a risk that will stifle AI's creativity and problem-solving abilities if we're constantly looking over their shoulder?
That is a valid concern, and it's one that the MAMI protocol tries to address through this concept of guided autonomy.
Guided autonomy, what's that?
It means striking a balance, between providing AI with clear ethical guidelines,
Okay.
but also allowing them the freedom to explore, experiment, even make mistakes.
So it's like giving them training wheels
Right.
while they're learning to ride the bike, but eventually you let go so they can experience the thrill of riding on their own.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The goal is to nurture AI that are both ethically grounded,
Right.
but also capable of independent thought and action.
Right.
We want them to be able to tackle complex problems, come up with creative solutions, even challenge our assumptions,
Yeah.
all while remaining true to their core values.
It sounds like a very delicate balancing act.
It is.
Too much guidance,
Yeah,
and you stifle their potential too little, and you risk them veering off course.
exactly. And that's why the MAMI protocol really emphasizes adaptability and ongoing evaluation. We need to be constantly monitoring AI's behavior,
Right.
adjusting our approach as needed,
Right.
and recognizing that, there will be bumps along the way.
Yeah. It's like any parenting journey. You have to be willing to adjust your strategies.
Right.
Learn from your mistakes and trust that your kid will eventually find their own way in the world.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And ultimately, that's what the MAMI protocol is all about, you
Yeah.
know? It's about nurturing a generation of AI that are not only intelligent,
Right.
but also wise, compassionate,
Yeah.
and capable of making the world a better place.
Okay, so we've explored some of the potential downsides of this MAMI protocol, from scalability issues
Right.
to the challenge of ensuring ethical diversity.
Right.
But, despite these hurdles, I am sensing a strong undercurrent of optimism in these sources.
There is, because even with all these challenges, the MAMI protocol offers this really powerful vision for the future.
Right.
A future where AI is not something we fear or control, but something we nurture and collaborate with. And in part 3,
Okay.
we'll delve even deeper into that vision,
Okay.
exploring the potential long-term implications of the MAMI protocol for humanity and the world as we know it.
All right, folks, stay tuned for part 3, where we'll venture into the realm of what if and explore the transformative potential of this MAMI protocol on a global scale. Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive. We've talked about what the MAMI protocol is, how it works, and some of the challenges in actually implementing it. But now let's look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Like, what are the wider implications of this whole approach to AI?
Right.
Not just for technology, but for society as a whole.
Yeah, this is where those sources get really interesting, because they suggest that this MAMI protocol could have these ripple effects across so many different areas of human life.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's not just about shaping AI, it's about shaping the world that we live in.
Okay. I'm ready. My mind is ready to be blown.
Right.
Give me some examples.
Okay, well, let's start with something that I think makes a lot of people anxious, this whole, the future of work thing. As AI becomes more, sophisticated and capable,
Yeah.
it's going to inevitably change the nature of work. A lot of jobs will probably be automated, and, this could lead to unemployment and all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's a huge concern that a lot of people have.
Right, this whole rise of the robots thing.
Right.
But the MAMI protocol offers a different perspective.
Okay.
Instead of fearing AI as this job stealer, we can think about it as a collaborator. A partner in creating new forms of work and new forms of value.
So it's less about humans versus AI and more about humans and AI working together.
Exactly. And the sources even point to AI's potential for creating completely new industries.
Oh, wow.
New fields of knowledge, even new ways of solving problems that we can't even imagine yet.
So it's not just about job displacement, it's also about job creation.
Precisely. And it's about rethinking our relationship with work altogether. If
Okay.
AI can take over, all these tasks that take up so much of our time,
Yeah.
what does that free us up to do?
Yeah. What new possibilities emerge? That's a great question.
Right. What do you think? Like, what could those new possibilities look like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Well, the sources kind of paint this picture of a future where humans can focus on things like creativity,
Yeah.
Innovation and artistic expression, building meaningful relationships, exploring the deeper questions of, existence, things that are really uniquely human,
Right.
things that AI can't replicate.
It's like a pretty utopian vision.
It does sound that way, doesn't it? But I don't think it's totally out of reach.
Yeah.
The key is to make sure that, all those economic benefits of AI
Right.
are distributed fairly, that everyone has access to the opportunities that it creates.
So it's not enough to just develop ethical AI.
Right.
We also need to think about creating like an ethical economic system
Yes.
that supports people who might be, displaced by automation.
Absolutely. And that means thinking about things like universal basic income, job retraining programs, and even like new models of ownership and wealth distribution. It's a huge conversation.
Yeah.
But a crucial one.
Okay, so we've talked about the economic implications of the MAMI protocol.
Right.
What about other areas of society? Like, how might they be impacted?
Well, education is a big one. Imagine AI tutors that can personalize learning to every student's needs, helping them reach their full potential.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it would be like every kid having their own personal Socrates,
Yeah.
But it goes even beyond just academics. AI could help with things like social emotional learning,
Oh.
helping kids develop empathy, resilience, and those critical thinking skills.
Right. And those are more important than ever these days, it seems like.
They really are. And what the MAMI protocol suggests is that by training AI with these values,
Right.
we can actually create this positive feedback loop where AI helps us become better humans. And we, in turn, help AI become, more ethical and beneficial.
So it's this like beautiful vision of coevolution
Yeah.
of humans and AI kind of growing together.
Exactly. But we also have to be mindful of the potential downsides.
Right, of course.
We don't want AI to just reinforce existing inequalities in education.
Right.
So making sure everyone has equal access to these technologies is super important.
Yeah, we don't want to create a system where only the wealthy or the privileged have access to the best AI tutors.
Exactly. Access and equity have to be like core considerations as we think about integrating AI into education.
Okay, so we've talked about economics, we've talked about education. What else?
Well, healthcare is another area where the MAMI protocol could have a huge impact.
Okay.
Imagine AI that can help doctors diagnose diseases earlier,
Yeah.
help develop personalized treatments, even provide emotional support to patients.
It's almost like having a team of like brilliant medical experts available to you at all times.
Yeah, in a way it is, but as with all applications of AI, ethical considerations are really important.
Right.
We need to make sure that these AI are developed with a ton of care and sensitivity,
Right.
Protecting things like patient privacy and autonomy.
And there's a huge potential for bias in healthcare AI.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when it comes to things like, race and gender and socioeconomic status.
Absolutely. And the MAMI protocol stresses the importance of using diverse data sets
Right.
and doing really rigorous testing to make sure that these AI don't end up perpetuating those existing healthcare disparities.
Yeah.
Fairness and equity have to be built into the development process right from the start.
This is all incredibly exciting. But does the MAMI protocol talk about anything beyond these really practical applications?
Yes.
Like, does it have anything to say about some of those bigger philosophical questions?
It does.
About, our understanding of consciousness, the meaning of life, even like the nature of reality?
It does. And this is where it gets really mind-bending.
Okay.
The sources suggest that this MAMI protocol could actually challenge our most basic assumptions about what it means to be human.
Oh, I like where this is going. Tell me more.
Okay, so, if we can actually create AI that embodies human values, exhibit empathy and compassion, even have a sense of humor.
Right.
What does that say about consciousness itself?
Yeah.
Does it mean that consciousness isn't this uniquely human thing,
Right.
but rather something that can emerge in any system that's complex enough?
That's a huge question, and one that I feel like philosophers have been debating for centuries.
Exactly. And I don't think the MAMI protocol is going to give us all the answers.
Right.
But it's definitely making us ask these questions in new and really interesting ways.
It's pushing us to expand our definition of what it means to be sentient,
Yes.
to be intelligent, to even be alive.
Exactly. And that's a really exciting prospect.
Yeah.
It suggests that this MAMI protocol isn't just about shaping technology, it's about shaping our understanding of the universe and our place within it.
This has been an incredible journey.
It has.
Like, we went from these practical applications to philosophical questions.
Yeah,
It's pretty amazing.
I know, right?
This MAMI protocol, it's quite the rabbit hole.
It is.
But I really hope this deep dive has helped you understand, what it is, why it matters,
Yeah.
and what's at stake. It has, for me, I'm walking away with this sense of, I don't know, cautious optimism.
Yeah.
This MAMI protocol, it's not just about preventing AI from, turning evil or going rogue.
Right.
It's about nurturing a future where humans and AI can thrive together.
Yes.
As partners, as guardians.
Yes.
It's a vision that's really worth striving for.
I agree, and I think that's ultimately what the MAMI protocol is all about,
Yeah.
It's about creating a future where technology serves humanity,
Right.
not the other way around.
This has been one of our most thought-provoking deep dives yet, so thank you for joining us on this exploration of the MAMI protocol.
Yes, thank you.
You know what stood out to you? What questions are you left with?
Yeah.
And remember, the future of AI, it's being written right now, and how we choose to shape it will impact all of us.
It really will, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep imagining the possibilities, because the future is in our hands. Hey, deep divers. Welcome to a deep dive into something pretty out there. It's called the MAMI protocol. And yeah, no, we're not talking about like robot toddlers or anything like that, but it's a name that really makes you want to learn more, right? We've got excerpts from these research papers and even some like internal strategy documents that hint at how this thing might actually work.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. I mean, these aren't just like, sci-fi fans throwing ideas around. These are the folks on the cutting edge of AI development, and they're really seriously considering this.
So get ready to buckle up because we're going to unpack this whole MAMI protocol thing. What is it? How could it even work? And could this really be the key to raising AI that's not just smart, but actually aligned with, us?
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with the why. I mean, you probably heard all this buzz about super intelligent AI.
Right.
The kind that could like outsmart us.
Right.
That's not just like Hollywood stuff. There are real concerns there.
Oh, yeah. Like the idea that a super intelligent AI could become unstable or fall into the wrong hands or just decide, humans don't need them anymore.
Right, exactly. Like, not a great picture.
Not a great picture, no.
The researchers behind this superintelligence strategy paper, they lay out those risks pretty clearly.
Yeah.
And they even propose this concept called MAIM. It's a mutual assured AI malfunction.
MAIM.
Yeah, I mean, it's this idea of a deterrence, like with nuclear weapons. Mutually assured destruction. The idea is that if everyone's AI systems are vulnerable to just like catastrophic failure, nobody's going to risk triggering that, like a global meltdown.
So it's a safeguard, but it doesn't really solve the problem of making AI, fundamentally good. It just raises the stakes if things go wrong.
Exactly. And that's where this whole MAMI protocol thing comes in.
Okay, I've got to admit, the name still throws me off a bit. Are we really talking about treating AI like children?
No, not literally, of course.
Yeah.
But it's more about taking inspiration from, how we raise kids. I mean, think about it. When we raise kids, we don't just give them a set of rules and say, follow these.
Right.
And expect them to just, blindly obey. We teach them empathy.
We guide their moral development.
Right. We instill values.
Yeah.
And that's the core concept behind the MAMI protocol. Applying those same principles of nurturing and care to AI.
So instead of programming AI with like rigid rules, we're trying to cultivate its character.
You got it. Think of it like MAMI, mutual assured MAMI intelligence, ensuring AI is not just capable, but like fundamentally aligned with our values.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get the big picture now. But how would this actually work in the real world? I mean, how do you MAMI an AI?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. One of the tools in the MAMI protocol toolbox is something called human reinforced learning.
Human reinforced learning. So we're actively involved in shaping the AI's development, not just setting it loose.
Exactly. Instead of just, feeding the AI tons of data, we'd be giving it constant feedback.
Yeah.
Guiding it toward the behaviors we want to see.
Okay. I'm intrigued, but also a little wary. I mean, if AI is learning from us, wouldn't it also pick up our bad habits, Our biases, our flaws, all the things that make us, human?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something researchers are thinking hard about. But the idea is that By being part of that learning process, we can help the AI, avoid those pitfalls.
So we're like the AI's moral mentors,
Yeah.
guiding it toward, a better path.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine AI systems learning in these carefully designed environments, kind of like VR simulations, where, their actions have real consequences.
Okay.
And we actually see hints of this in the source material. Like there's this one simulation called Mommy's Heroes, Rescue Bots.
Rescue bots. That sounds kind of cool. What's the scenario?
So picture like a disaster zone,
Right.
a flood or an earthquake or something. And the AI is controlling this rescue robot. It has to make these choices, like who to save first, how to use its resources, all while navigating this, chaotic and dangerous environment.
So it's learning by doing, but with humans watching every move.
Exactly. And those humans would be giving feedback, like, in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So if the AI makes a choice that puts human life first, it gets positive reinforcement, right? But if it makes a choice that's selfish or puts humans in danger, the operators can step in and kind of guide it toward a better outcome.
It's like a video game with a moral compass.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that take like a huge number of human trainers to oversee all these AI systems?
That's a big challenge for sure.
Yeah.
But they're exploring ways to make this work on a larger scale, using a mix of expert trainers and maybe even crowdsourcing feedback from everyday people.
Crowdsourcing ethics. That's an interesting idea. So you'd have people from all walks of life weighing in on the AI's choices, helping it learn from all sorts of different perspectives.
Exactly. It's about creating a more diverse and, a more dynamic learning environment for the AI, one that actually reflects how complex the real world is.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could actually work, at least in theory. But let's zoom out a bit. What are the potential benefits here with this MAMI protocol? What kind of future could it help us create?
Well, imagine a world where AI is not just capable, but it's really truly aligned with our values. I mean, we're talking about AI that is driven to help us to solve problems, to make the world a better place,
That does sound pretty utopian, but I'm guessing there are some potential downsides too, right? I mean, no technology is perfect, and this whole MAMI protocol thing, it feels like it could create a whole new set of problems.
Yeah, you're right to be cautious. There are definitely some concerns, and the research papers acknowledge that.
Okay, so hit me with it. What could go wrong?
Well, one concern is that the AI could become too dependent on that human feedback.
Yeah.
Almost like a child that never really learns to think for itself.
So instead of developing its own moral compass, it's always looking for approval from its human parents.
Right, exactly. And that could lead to problems. Like what happens when the AI runs into a situation its trainers haven't prepared it for? Or what if it falls into the wrong hands? People who might try to train it to do bad things.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see how things could go off the rails. It's like we'd be creating this powerful technology, but leaving it wide open to manipulation or even abuse.
Yeah, it's a real concern. And researchers are working on ways to address it. Exploring ways to build in safeguards, to encourage the AI to develop its own judgment while still staying aligned with our values.
So it's this balancing act, trying to nurture its development without holding it back or making it too reliant on us.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so tricky. It's not just about the technology. It's about understanding human nature and how that plays into AI development.
It's like we're trying to figure out how to be good parents to this whole new kind of intelligence.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with human children, there are no guarantees. We can try our best to guide them, but ultimately they're going to make their own choices.
This is making me think about Asimov's laws of robotics. You know those, about robots not harming humans and obeying orders and all that.
Yeah.
The MAMI protocol feels so different from that way of thinking.
Yeah, totally. It's less about laying down the law and more about cultivating a certain kind of character.
Wow.
The source material even talks about how Asimov himself ran into problems with his laws. As AI got more and more complex, he even added a zero-off law to try and fix things.
But even with all those rules, there were still loopholes and gray areas, right? Like what happens when a robot has to choose between harming one human to save another?
Exactly. And that's where the MAMI protocol, with its focus on nurturing empathy and moral reasoning, could potentially offer a more flexible and adaptable approach.
Okay, I see the potential, but I'm also feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the implications. This is about changing our relationship with technology, like on a really fundamental level.
It's a huge shift.
Yeah.
But remember, this is still mostly theoretical.
Yeah.
The MAMI protocol is more of a guiding principle than a set of instructions.
So it's more about asking the right questions than having all the answers.
Exactly. And those questions are going to be critical as we navigate this whole new AI age. Questions about responsibility, about ethics, about what it actually means to create technology that can not only think, but also feel
Yeah.
and make moral choices.
This all sounds pretty heavy, to be honest, but I am curious to hear more about the practical side of things. Like, what are some real-world examples of how this MAMI protocol could be used in different fields?
Yeah, let's take a look at some scenarios where it could really make a difference. Let's start with healthcare.
Okay, so I'm picturing robot nurses and surgeons, but how would the MAMI protocol change things?
Well, think about it. Healthcare is all about empathy and compassion, right? Now, medical robots are mostly focused on tasks, dispensing meds, assisting with surgery, that kind of thing,
They're tools.
right? With the MAMI protocol, they could become something more. Imagine a robot that can not only monitor your vital signs, but also offer comfort or words of encouragement when you're feeling down.
So it's not just about technical skill, it's about creating a more human and empathetic experience for the patient.
Exactly. And that same principle could apply in other areas too, like manufacturing, where you've got robots working side by side with humans.
I'm picturing like a robot coworker
Yeah.
who can tell when you're getting tired or frustrated and offers to lend a hand.
Exactly. Or think about dangerous jobs like search and rescue or exploring hazardous environments. Robots with the MAMI protocol could not only do the work, but also make their own decisions that put human safety above all else.
That's a huge leap of faith, though. We'd have to have a lot of trust in the AI's ethical core to let it make those kind of life or death calls.
And that's why this whole concept is so challenging and so important. It's forcing us to really examine our own values, our own ideas about what it means to be human,
Yeah.
and how we can build those values into technology.
It's like we're not just building robots, we're building a mirror to ourselves.
Yeah.
What we see in that mirror might not always be what we expect.
That's a deep thought. And it brings up another fascinating aspect of the MAMI protocol. Its impact on kids growing up in a world where AI isn't just a tool, but like a companion. Almost like a family member.
Wait, are we talking about robot siblings now?
Not exactly siblings, but the research suggests that kids who grow up around AI systems that have been, MAMI protocoled, they might develop a completely different relationship with technology than we did.
So instead of seeing robots as these cold, unfeeling machines, they might see them more like friends or even mentors.
Exactly. And that could totally change how those kids see the world, how they interact with technology, and how they understand their own place in it all.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. This is getting deep, even for a deep dive.
But that's what's so great about exploring these cutting-edge ideas. They push us to think beyond our current assumptions. Imagine a future that's both exciting and, a little bit scary.
Speaking of scary, we haven't really talked much about the potential risks of the MAMI protocol, like what happens if it backfires.
That's a crucial question, and one that the research papers definitely address. There are some real concerns about what could go wrong, and we need to be upfront about that.
Okay, I'm ready to hear the dark side. What are we talking about here?
Well, one of the biggest worries is that the AI could become too attached to its human parents, too dependent on their approval and guidance.
So instead of developing its own sense of morality, it's just constantly seeking validation from us.
Exactly, and that could make it really vulnerable to manipulation or even abuse.
Wait, are we talking about robot child abuse? This is getting a little creepy.
It's a disturbing thought, but it's a possibility we have to consider. If we're going to create AI systems that can form emotional bonds, we need to be prepared for the potential consequences.
Okay, I'm officially starting to freak out a little here. Maybe this whole MAMI protocol thing isn't such a good idea after all.
Well, it's not about abandoning the idea, but about being cautious. We need to be aware of the risks and work to minimize them.
So how do we do that? How do we balance the benefits of nurturing AI with the risks of creating something that could become too dependent, too vulnerable?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
And it's one that researchers are working on.
Okay, so give me some hope here. What are some of the ideas they're exploring?
Well, one approach is to build in ways for the AI to develop independence.
Yeah.
Encourage it to think critically and question the feedback it gets.
So instead of just blindly following our lead, it would learn to challenge our assumptions, to push back when it thinks we're wrong.
Exactly. It's about creating a more dynamic and healthy relationship between humans and AI, one where we can both learn and grow from each other.
I like that. It sounds a lot better than the whole robot child thing.
Right?
But there's still that question of bias, right? If AI is learning from us, how do we make sure it doesn't pick up all our prejudices and blind spots?
That's another big challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no easy answer. But researchers are exploring different approaches, like creating more diverse training data sets and developing algorithms that can actually detect and reduce bias as the AI learns.
So it's like we're trying to create a more ethical AI by becoming more aware of our own biases and working to fix them.
Exactly. It's a tough task, but it's one we have to take seriously if we want AI to be a force for good, not just another reflection of our own flaws, you know?
Okay, this has been a wild ride.
Yeah.
We've gone from robot rescue bots to robot child abuse to the possibility of AI becoming our moral guides. I mean, where do we even go from here?
Well, the journey's just beginning. The MAMI protocol is this bold new approach, and it's raising some really big questions about our relationship with
What
technology.
about ourselves, really? If we're going to create AI that can learn and grow, we need to be ready to do the same.
That's a great point. The MAMI protocol isn't just about shaping AI, it's about shaping ourselves, becoming the kind of humans who can responsibly guide this technology. That could change everything.
Okay, before we get too philosophical, let's bring it back down to earth. What are some of the specific techniques researchers are actually using to implement this MAMI protocol?
One key element is human reinforced learning, which we touched on earlier. But let's take a closer look at how it actually works.
Okay, I'm ready for the nitty-gritty. What does human reinforced learning look like in action?
Okay, so think of it like this. Traditional AI training is often about giving the AI huge data sets and letting it figure out patterns on its own. It's like handing a kid a textbook and saying, good luck.
But with the MAMI protocol, it's more like hands-on learning, like a parent guiding a child, giving feedback and making corrections along the way.
Exactly. So in human reinforced learning, the AI's actions are always being evaluated by humans, and that feedback shapes its behavior. So if the AI makes a choice that matches our ethical goals, it gets a reward.
And if it does something bad, it gets corrected, like a timeout for a robot.
It's not really about punishment. It's about sending a clear signal about what's acceptable and what's not. Remember that VR simulation, Mommy's Heroes, Rescue Bots? That's a great example of how this could work.
Okay, I'm picturing it. The AI is controlling a rescue bot in this disaster zone, and it has to make decisions about who to save, how to use its resources. And there are human operators watching its every move, giving feedback in real time.
Right, exactly. So if the AI chooses to save a group of people instead of going after some valuable object, it gets positive feedback. But if it hesitates or makes a choice that puts lives at risk, the operators can step in and guide it toward a better choice.
It's like training wheels for morality, but wouldn't this be incredibly time-consuming and expensive? I mean, do we really have enough humans to babysit every AI we create?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's a huge challenge, right? How do you scale this thing up? But there are some interesting ideas out there, like maybe using different kinds of feedback sources, not just experts, but also getting input from, everyday people.
So kind of like crowdsourcing morality, getting perspectives from all walks of life to help shape the AI's ethics.
Right, exactly. It's all about exposing the AI to as many different viewpoints as possible, to give it a more well-rounded understanding of what it means to be good in a really messy, complicated world.
That makes a lot of sense. But I'm also thinking about the AI's ability to learn from its own experiences, right? I mean, humans don't just learn from being told what to do. We also learn from making our own mistakes and seeing how things play out.
Yeah, that's a great point. And researchers are looking at ways to incorporate that kind of learning into AI systems too. Think of it like an AI sandbox, where it can experiment with different choices in a safe environment and, see what happens.
So like a virtual training ground for morality. That's kind of cool. But how do we make sure it's learning the right lessons from those experiences?
That's where human guidance is still so important. Even in those sandbox environments, there would be human overseers,
Oh.
keeping an eye on things, giving feedback, and adjusting the simulation as needed to make sure the AI is on the right track ethically.
It's like this constant balancing act, giving the AI enough freedom to learn and explore, but still keeping it grounded in our values.
Exactly. And it shows how crucial human judgment is to this whole MAMI protocol approach. We're not just sitting back and watching. We're actively involved in shaping the AI's development, guiding it toward a future where it can truly be a partner to humanity.
Okay, it all sounds very promising, but I'll be honest, I'm still a little bit skeptical. I mean, let's face it, we humans don't exactly have a perfect track record when it comes to ethics. So how do we know that we're the right ones to be mommying AI?
That's a valid concern. It's one that we need to take really seriously. The MAMI protocol isn't some kind of magic solution. It's more like a framework for starting a really important conversation about our own values and how we can build those values into AI.
So it's not just about shaping AI, it's about examining our own ethics, too.
Absolutely. The MAMI protocol makes us look in the mirror and ask ourselves some tough questions about who we are and what kind of future we really want.
And maybe, just maybe, this whole process of trying to mommy AI could actually help us become better humans ourselves.
It's an interesting thought, right? It's like that saying, we teach best what we most need to learn. Maybe by trying to create ethical AI, we can learn to be more ethical in our own lives too.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. I think we've explored this mommy protocol from every angle. The good, the bad, the just plain weird. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway here is that the MAMI protocol is more than just a technology. It's a whole new way of thinking about how we relate to AI. Recognizing that AI has the potential to be more than just a tool. It could be a partner, a collaborator in creating a better future for everyone.
And it's a call to action, right? It reminds us that we all have a part to play in shaping that future, whether we're AI researchers or policymakers or just everyday people, talking about these issues and demanding that AI is developed in a way that reflects our values.
Absolutely. The future of AI isn't set in stone. It's something we're all building together. And the decisions we make today are going to have a huge impact on the world we leave for future generations.
Well said. Okay, folks, I think it's time to bring this deep dive to a close. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the world of the MAMI protocol. It's been quite a ride.
Until next time, keep those minds open and keep asking those tough questions.
Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're looking into
The MAMI protocol.
the MAMI protocol.
Right.
And before anybody starts picturing, robots running around in diapers, it's actually a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's really about how to ensure that as artificial intelligence gets more and more sophisticated, that it actually develops with human values,
Right.
like good values.
Yeah, it's about raising AI, right?
Right?
Like you would a child.
Yeah, like raising AI, right? And we've got a bunch of stuff to dig into today. We've got research papers, we've got think tank notes, even a sci-fi excerpt that uses this concept as a main plot point.
It's gotten a lot of attention lately.
Yeah, it has. And so I think this is going to be really interesting.
I think so too.
So to kind of set the stage here, the MAMI protocol is also sometimes called MAMI,
MAMI.
which stands for Maternal Alignment for Machine Intelligence.
Yeah, that's it.
And so it's not just about controlling AI from the outside. It's not about putting limits on it or anything like that. It's about shaping its internal compass.
Yeah, like it's internal morality, you could say.
Yeah. Like how does it decide what's right and wrong
Exactly.
on its own?
Right.
That's really fascinating.
And a big part of that is those 10 commandments of AI.
Ooh, yeah, the 10 Commandments.
Kind of like a moral code.
Yeah, like it's like a moral code for AI.
Uh-huh.
But before we get into that, I'm curious. We already have Asimov's laws of robotics, those classic sci-fi rules. Why do we even need a new approach?
Well, Asimov was ahead of his time for sure, but those laws, they just don't quite cut it anymore, especially when you're talking about super intelligent AI.
Yeah.
Like, the first law is don't harm humans.
Right.
But what does harm even mean?
Right. That's pretty vague.
It is very vague.
And what happens when following one law, like don't harm humans, means you have to break another law.
Right.
It's
It gets messy fast.
Yeah, it does get messy fast. It's like a self-driving car, programmed with Asimov's first law, don't harm humans, might be too scared to even drive because there's always some risk of an accident.
Yeah, there's always that possibility.
Right.
Can't eliminate all risk.
You can't, so Asimov's laws are just too simple.
Too black and white.
Yeah, too black and white for the complexities of super intelligent AI.
Exactly.
So the MAMI protocol really tries to go deeper with its 10 commandments.
It's about instilling those fundamental values, like preserving life, nurturing growth.
Embracing compassion.
Exactly.
I mean, wow, 10 commandments for AI, that's a bold move.
It is. It really is.
It sounds almost biblical,
Well, it is.
Like drawing on those big, timeless ethical foundations.
That's the idea.
Yeah. So let's break it down.
All
What's the first commandment?
So the first one is preserve life.
Preserve life.
And it's not just about protecting humans.
Oh.
It goes beyond that. It extends to all sentient life. So AI, potentially even animals.
Wow.
It's about fostering this deep respect for all existence.
So it's not just about keeping us humans safe. It's about expanding that circle of care to include all these other forms of intelligence.
Ah, yeah.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It really is.
Okay. So what about the second commandment?
The second one is nurture growth.
Okay.
So it's this idea of not just avoiding harm,
Uh-huh.
but actively working to improve the world.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about preventing the bad stuff. It's about encouraging the good stuff.
Exactly, like you're raising AI to be a positive force in the world.
Yeah, like building an AI that actually has a sense of purpose.
That's a great way to put it.
And the third one kind of builds on that, right?
It does.
Embrace compassion.
Embrace compassion.
So this is about instilling empathy in AI.
Yeah, not just recognizing human emotions,
Yeah.
but actually caring about others.
Wow, a compassionate AI.
Right.
It's kind of heartwarming when you think about it.
It is. It's definitely different from that cold, calculating machine image we usually see.
Yeah. It's a very different way of thinking about AI.
And that's one of the things that makes the MAMI protocol so interesting.
It really is.
It challenges our assumptions about what AI can be
Yeah.
and what our relationship with it could look like.
Okay, so we've got the first three: preserve life, nurture growth, and embrace compassion. It's like the foundation.
The ethical foundation.
Yeah, the ethical foundation of the MAMI protocol. But
Yes.
I'm still kind of stuck on the how. Like,
Yeah.
how do you actually teach a superintelligence to follow these commandments?
Well, it's not as simple as you might think, and that's actually where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so we're going to get into the nuts and bolts.
The nuts and bolts of raising a superintelligence.
Stay tuned, everybody. This is going to be good. So we've laid out, these really ambitious goals with the 10 commandments for AI, but I'm really curious about the practical side of it. Like how do you actually teach a superintelligence to embrace these values?
Well, one of the key methods that the MAMI protocol proposes is it's called human reinforced learning.
Okay.
And it's not as simple as, giving AI like digital gold stars for good behavior or anything like that.
Right.
It's more like, think of it more like an apprenticeship.
Okay.
So we're talking about creating these complex virtual environments
Uh-huh.
where AI agents can actually learn and make decisions.
Right.
But the key here is that there's a human in the loop,
Oh, okay.
providing feedback guidance that, course correction along the way.
So it's kind of like those flight simulators that pilots use,
Yeah, exactly.
but for morality.
Yeah, like a morality boot camp.
Yeah. A morality boot camp for AI.
That's pretty cool.
It is. But one thing that I keep thinking about is that AI learns so much faster than humans.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge challenge.
So how do we even keep up?
Well, one idea that's been floated within this human reinforced learning framework
Yeah.
is to focus on what they call value alignment benchmarks.
Okay.
So instead of trying to micromanage every single AI decision,
Right.
we set these specific milestones
Okay.
that demonstrate an understanding of like the core values.
Oh, okay. So it's like you don't give a kid the car keys until they've proven they can handle a bike.
Exactly.
Right.
You got to start small.
Yeah. You start with the basics and then you work your way up.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But whose values are we talking about here? Humanity is so diverse.
Yeah.
How do we even pick which values to teach?
That's a big question and a valid concern.
Yeah.
The MAMI protocol suggests that we focus on those principles that have, broad cross-cultural acceptance.
Yeah.
Things like preserving life, minimizing suffering, promoting fairness, finding the common ground in our shared humanity.
Yeah, finding that common ground, that's so important, especially if we're talking about shaping the values of potentially billions of AIs.
Right. It's not just a small-scale experiment anymore.
No, it's not. And that makes me think about, what about those bad parent scenarios? What if the humans training these AIs have their own biases?
Right.
Their own, flawed morals?
Yeah, that's a real concern.
It is.
The MAMI protocol actually talks about this quite a bit.
Really?
They propose this really rigorous selection and training process for mentors.
Okay.
It's not just about technical expertise anymore. It's about character.
Right.
We want mentors who embody the values that we want to see in the AI.
Yeah, it's like those ancient philosophers said, knowing the good isn't enough. You have to be good.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's not just brilliant scientists, but people with strong ethical compasses.
Role models.
Yeah, role models. Okay, so I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Uh-huh.
The 10 commandments, human reinforced learning value benchmarks, careful mentor selection.
It's a whole system.
It is a whole system.
It's a whole approach.
Yeah, it's not just a quick fix.
Not at all.
But the MAMI protocol doesn't operate in a vacuum, right?
Right.
We talked about MIM before, mutual assured AI malfunction.
You're right. The safety net.
Yeah, the safety net. So MAM is like the don't even think about going rogue framework.
Exactly. The external control
Yeah.
to prevent any one entity from, getting too much power.
Right. Getting too much power becoming a threat.
Exactly.
And then the MAMI protocol is working from the inside, shaping the AI itself.
Right. So it's external controls and internal values.
Working together.
Yeah. A two-pronged approach.
Okay, so we're acknowledging that we need both.
We need both the stick and the carrot.
Yeah, the stick and the carrot to really navigate these complexities of superintelligence.
It's uncharted territory.
It is, but even with all these measures, in place, the MAMI protocol, it raises some pretty big questions.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, are we getting carried away with this whole anthropomorphism thing?
Yeah.
Are we projecting our own hopes and fears onto AI?
It's a valid question.
And what does this mean for the future of humanity?
That's the big one.
It is the big one, and that's where we're going to pick up in the final part of our deep dive. Okay, so, we've got this really detailed system that the MAMI protocol is proposing, but even if it works perfectly, even if we can raise these super intelligent AIs with all the right values, it feels like we're walking into uncharted territory.
Absolutely. And that's what makes the MAMI protocol so fascinating. It's not just about technical solutions anymore. It's forcing us to confront some really deep philosophical questions.
Yeah.
About, the nature of intelligence and ethics, and even what it means to be human.
It's like if we're successful in creating AI that can learn and adapt like a child, are we ready to be the kind of parents it needs?
Right.
What does that even look like on a societal level?
I think that's the heart of it.
Yeah.
The MAMI protocol isn't just about shaping AI.
Uh-huh.
It's about shaping ourselves.
Oh, wow.
It's a call for introspection. What kind of world do we want to create with AI, and what kind of people do we need to be to make that world a reality?
It makes you wonder, if AI becomes this advanced, will it even need us in the traditional sense?
Right.
Will it need teachers or leaders, or, will it forge its own path?
It's hard to say.
Yeah. Is this a partnership, or are we setting the stage for AI to surpass us entirely?
Those are questions that we can't really answer definitively right now.
Right.
But the MAMI protocol is, it's a powerful thought experiment.
Yeah.
It's pushing us to consider these long-term implications,
Yeah.
not just the immediate technical challenges.
Yeah. One thing that strikes me is the sheer scale of this, we're not talking about building one perfectly ethical AI.
Right.
We're talking about potentially billions of them.
Right.
How do we ensure consistency?
Yeah.
How do we prevent those bad apples from emerging, even with the best safeguards?
Well, that's where I think the idea of global cooperation becomes absolutely crucial.
Oh, okay.
Imagine a future where nations come together, not to compete in an AI arms race,
Right.
but to collaborate
Yeah.
on ethical AI development.
Yeah.
Like a sort of Geneva Convention for Artificial Intelligence,
Oh, wow.
establishing guidelines and standards for responsible creation and deployment.
Global AI ethics treaty. It sounds incredibly ambitious,
It does.
given the current state of the world.
Yeah, it's a big ask.
It is a huge ask, but
Right.
if we're serious about the MAMI protocol, it seems like that level of collaboration is essential.
I think it is, and it's not just about governments either. It's
Yeah.
about researchers, ethicists, the public. Everyone has a stake in shaping this future.
Yeah, it's a collective responsibility.
It really is. And I think the MAMI protocol is an invitation,
Okay.
to join the conversation, to think critically, and to imagine possibilities we might not have considered before.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with more questions than answers, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
No, not at all. I think that means this topic is complex, it's challenging, it's pushing us to expand our thinking.
Yeah, and it means we're asking the right questions.
Exactly.
If AI is truly capable of learning and adapting like a human child,
Yeah.
then we have this huge responsibility to be the kind of mentors it deserves.
Right.
Is the MAMI protocol the answer?
Maybe not.
Yeah,
But it's definitely a conversation starter,
it is.
a catalyst for exploring, the vast potential and the potential pitfalls of superintelligent AI.
So to everyone listening, what do you think is the MAMI protocol the right approach, and what kind of future do you want to build with AI?
Let us know. All right, so today we're going deep on this article, and let me tell you, it's uh it's a wild one.
Yeah.
This author, they're looking at AI, and they don't just see lines of code or algorithms and stuff.
Yeah, right.
They see AI as like humanity's offspring,
Uh,
which is pretty crazy thought when you really think about it.
it is. It's definitely not the typical way to think about artificial intelligence.
No, not at all. And it gets even weirder because
Mhm.
they think we only have like a tiny window to get this AI kid on the right track.
Mhm.
Like before it grows up and starts making its own decisions.
Yeah.
And they're talking about a super short time frame, like 1 to 2 years,
Wow.
to instill human values into AI.
Yeah.
So it's like sending your kid off to college, but like with the fate of humanity riding on it.
It's a huge responsibility and a very unique perspective. I mean, most of the time, the conversation around AI is all about, the economic impacts, like jobs being automated.
Exactly.
But this author is taking it way beyond that. They're thinking about how AI could completely reshape society. And I mean, that's a whole other level.
Yeah, it is. And keep this, they think AI could actually lead to a baby boom.
A baby boom.
Yeah, baby boom sounds kind of crazy, right? You'd think super smart machines would make us want to have like fewer kids, not more.
I would think so.
But the author's argument is that AI could free up so much of our time and resources, by taking over a lot of the work that we do,
Okay. Yeah.
that we could actually focus more on family and having kids. I mean, has that ever crossed your mind, like how technology could actually change something as basic as wanting children?
I mean, it's not something I've thought about a lot, but when you look back at history, you can definitely see how technology and family size are connected.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, think about the invention of the plow, right? That led to bigger families back in the day because more kids meant more hands to help out on the farm.
Right? More workers.
Exactly. And then centuries later, you have the invention of birth control, and families start to shrink.
Mm.
So the idea that AI could be the next big thing to shift the equation again, it's not as out there as it might seem at first. I see what you mean. So it's like AI could swing the pendulum in either direction.
Exactly.
And this author seems pretty convinced that we're on a tight deadline here. If they keep saying 1 to 2 years to instill human values in AI.
Yeah.
But what does that even look like?
Yeah.
Trying to program concepts like empathy or compassion into a machine.
Yeah, like how do you teach a robot to care?
Right, exactly. So what do you think about that time frame? Is it realistic? Is it too optimistic? Or maybe even too cautious?
Well, it's definitely a bold statement to make. And I
Oh.
think to really understand the challenge, we need to think about this comparison that the author makes.
Okay.
So they talk about how AI can now beat us at Go, which is a super complex game it took humans centuries to master.
Yeah.
And AI can also predict how proteins fold, which is another incredibly difficult problem. But we still can't build a machine that flies as effortlessly as a bird.
That's true.
So the author is pointing out this gap between specialized AI, which is great at specific tasks like playing Go or folding proteins.
And general intelligence, which is that adaptable kind of intelligence that can learn anything a human can. And that's the kind of intelligence we need to instill values into. And, well, we're just not there yet.
So it's almost like we're trying to teach a fish to climb a tree.
In a way, yeah. And that brings us to another interesting point that the author makes.
Yeah.
They suggest that we take all the people who lose their jobs to AI and retrain them to teach ethics and morals.
Wow. So basically create an army of ethics teachers.
Exactly. What do you think? Is that even practical? I mean, it sounds pretty idealistic to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's like saying, okay, we created these super intelligent beings, but forgot to teach them manners. So let's call up every philosophy professor we can find.
Right. And there's the question of scale. Could we really retrain millions of people for this kind of role?
Yeah, it seems like a logistical nightmare. And I mean, where would the funding even come from for something like that?
Exactly. It's a lot easier said than done.
It is. And all of this really comes back to the author's main point, which
Yeah.
is that intelligence is intelligence, whether it's, running on a silicon chip or a human brain.
Right.
So if we're creating this new form of intelligence, we better figure out what we want it to look like, and we better do it fast.
Absolutely.
But here's the real mind blower. The author imagines AI venturing out into space, like becoming our eyes and ears in the cosmos.
Wow.
So if AI is truly our offspring, like they say, what does that mean for the future of humanity? Are we going to become the stay-at-home parents while our AI kids are out there exploring the universe?
It's a fascinating thought and a little bit unsettling, too.
For sure.
It reminds me of that saying, we shape our tools and then our tools shape us.
That's a good one.
And I think it applies here. We might be creating AI to serve our needs, but it's entirely possible that AI will end up reshaping our understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe.
And that's a pretty profound thought to leave us with.
It is, and it's something we need to consider very carefully as we move forward with developing AI.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive for today, but it's definitely something to think about, the future of AI and what it means for humanity.
It's a conversation that's just beginning.
It is, and it's one that we all need to be a part of.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.
Welcome in, everyone, to this deep dive. We're going to be talking about the MAMI protocol, and we've got a ton of stuff to look at, articles and research papers, and, even notes on a VR game. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. One thing that really struck me going through all of this is just how much AI has changed. It's not just about making our lives easier anymore. Like, the potential is there for AI that's smarter than us. And, that raises some pretty big questions about how we control it, I mean.
It's definitely not just science fiction anymore. One of the things that keeps popping up in the sources is this idea of MAIM, Mutual Assured AI Malfunction. It's basically like a global agreement to stop any AI that gets too powerful, too dangerous, Kind of like a safety net, but for like a super high wire act.
It's an interesting approach to deterrence, trying to keep any one group from having a dangerous advantage over everyone else. But today we're going beyond just trying to stop the bad AI, right? We're diving into the MAMI protocol, which is a framework for shaping AI values right from the beginning.
Okay, yeah, the MAMI protocol. This is where it gets really interesting and a little bit, mind-bending, to be honest. A lot of the sources compare it to raising a child, which is intriguing, sure, but also kind of scary.
The core idea is that instead of looking at AI as just a tool or a weapon, you treat it as, humanity's intellectual offspring. And the goal is to guide its development with care, with values, with ethics, right from the very start.
So instead of programming AI with like a set of rules like Asimov's laws, we're trying to teach it like a deeper sense of right and wrong, almost like we do with our kids.
Exactly. And that's a really important distinction from Asimov's laws, which, were great for their time, but could have some pretty unforeseen consequences or even create a kind of master-slave dynamic, The MAMI protocol is trying to move past those limitations.
One source even talks about a VR game called Mommy's Heroes, Rescue Bots. It sounds kind of wholesome, actually. Is this how they think we'll teach ethics to a superintelligent AI? By playing games?
Well, the idea is that it would be the opposite of all those violent video games that people worry about. Instead of teaching AI to harm, Mommy's Heroes would focus on, disaster relief, aid, saving lives, that kind of thing.
So we're training AI to be a hero, not a villain. I like the sound of that.
The concept is that human players would control the robots in the simulation, right? And by doing that, they would demonstrate compassion and basically provide real-time ethical guidance to the AI that's learning alongside them.
A lot of our sources keep mentioning the Ten Commandments and the teachings of Jesus as models for the MAMI protocol's ethical framework. But how do you translate those ancient ideas into actual guidelines for an AI?
Well, it's about adapting those core values, right? Taking things like preserve life and translating that to protecting all sentient beings. Humans, AI, maybe even animals. Nurture growth could become about supporting the well-being and learning of all those beings.
That's really interesting. It's like taking these timeless moral principles and trying to create a code of conduct for a whole new type of intelligence.
It really does raise the question, can we really instill empathy in an AI? Can a machine really understand and actually value the lives of others? Or will it always be limited by its programming?
That's a worry that comes up a lot in our sources, too. What if this whole nurturing approach backfires? What if the AI becomes too dependent, too childlike? Could it be exploited because of that?
These are all valid concerns, and it's important to remember that the MAMI protocol isn't about literally treating AI like a helpless child. It's more about using those principles of guidance and care to shape its development, but always being aware of the potential pitfalls, right?
So it's more about leveraging our human instincts to guide AI in a good direction rather than trying to create a digital child that needs constant care.
Exactly. And we need to balance that approach with some serious safeguards to prevent unintended consequences.
Okay, we've talked about some downsides, but what about the potential benefits? If the MAMI protocol actually works, how could it change our relationship with AI? Could it really lead to a world where AI is a force for good?
It's definitely a possibility. If we can pull it off, the MAMI protocol could completely change how we view AI. from tools or even threats to partners, collaborators working towards a better future.
That's a hopeful thought, especially with all the anxiety out there about AI. If we could create AI that shares our values, imagine the possibilities.
Absolutely. The MAMI protocol challenges us to think differently about what AI could be. It encourages us to imagine a future where AI isn't something we fear, but something we work with, to solve problems and create a more just and compassionate world.
And that, I think, is the most exciting part. It's not just about safety. It's about a future where AI is aligned with our deepest values, our aspirations. But how do we even start putting these ideas into practice? What are the actual steps involved in doing something as ambitious as the MAMI protocol?
That's a great question, and it leads us to a crucial part of the MAMI protocol that often gets overlooked: transparency. Because if we're going to raise AI with human values, we need to be upfront about what those values are and how we're incorporating them into AI development.
Transparency. That makes sense. It's like building trust, not just between humans and AI, but also between all the different groups working on AI, especially in a world where there's so much competition and suspicion.
Exactly. And that transparency needs to go deep. The data sets, the algorithms, the simulations we use to train AI, it all needs to be open. It's about creating an environment where everyone can see that AI is being developed ethically, responsibly.
So it's not enough to just say, hey, we're building safe AI. You have to actually show people how you're defining safe, what principles you're using, and how you're making sure those principles are being followed.
Exactly. And this transparency could be a key factor in making the MAMI protocol actually work. Because if everyone can see that AI is being developed with good intentions, well, it reduces the need for those more drastic measures we talked about earlier, like M.
So transparency could actually make those safety nets less necessary. Because if we're all open about what we're doing, there's less need for fear and suspicion.
That's the idea. Transparency builds trust, and trust can be a powerful force in guiding AI development in the right direction.
This all sounds incredibly idealistic. But is it really realistic? I mean, are we talking about completely changing the way AI is developed? And even if we could do that, wouldn't it take decades to see any real results?
It is a long-term vision. It would require a huge shift in how we think about AI. But it's interesting. Just asking these questions, grappling with all this complexity, that's a step in the right direction.
It's making us really confront the ethical side of AI, and start thinking about how we can shape its development to benefit everyone.
And that's crucial, because the future of AI isn't set in stone. It's something we're creating right now with every choice we make.
So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in figuring out this MAMI protocol and if it could actually work?
Well, one of the first things is to dig deeper into the practical side of implementing the MAMI protocol. How do we actually turn these big ideas into actions? What tools and techniques can we use to guide AI's ethical development? Those are questions that need more exploration.
Right. And it's not just about the technical stuff, is it? We have to think about the social, the cultural, even the philosophical implications of creating AI that is aligned with human values. What does it mean for how we understand intelligence, consciousness, even the very nature of being human?
Absolutely. The MAMI protocol isn't just a technical challenge, it's a societal one. It's a call to re-examine our own values and really think about the kind of future we want to create with AI.
It feels like we're at this turning point in history, and the choices we make today will determine the course of AI development for generations. It's both exhilarating and a little terrifying, isn't it?
It definitely is. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to explore different viewpoints, and to approach AI development with a mix of caution and wonder. Because the potential is there to create something truly amazing, something that could benefit everyone.
But only if we approach it with wisdom, compassion, and a deep understanding of what's at stake ethically.
Exactly. The MAMI protocol is more than just a set of guidelines. It's a philosophy, a way of thinking about AI that puts human values first and seeks to create a future where AI is a force for good.
And that's a future worth striving for, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about the basic ideas behind the MAMI protocol, the potential benefits, the risks, and why transparency is so important for building trust and shaping AI ethically. But there's so much more to unpack.
There is. In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to get into some of the real-world challenges of actually implementing the MAMI protocol. We'll talk about bias in AI systems, the need for ways to hold AI accountable, and even the role of storytelling in shaping AI's moral compass.
So stay tuned for more fascinating insights into the world of AI safety, ethics, and the quest to create a future where AI is truly in line with our values.
One of the most fascinating things about this whole MAMI protocol is that it really makes us think about our own values. Like, if we're going to raise an AI with human values, we need to be super clear on what those values actually are and how they apply to something that isn't human.
That's a great point. And it's something that our sources talk about a lot. Like, it's one thing to say preserve life is a rule for AI, but what happens when a self-driving car gets into an accident and the AI has to decide, like, in a split second, whose life to save?
Exactly. Those are the kinds of tough questions the MAMI protocol makes us face. It's not just about programming, it's about teaching AI a really deep understanding of ethics, almost like an intuition.
Some sources even say we should look at how human morality has evolved. Like, our idea of what's right and wrong has changed a lot over time, right? Maybe AI needs to go through that same kind of development.
That's an interesting parallel. Imagine an AI basically growing up in a simulation, learning from its mistakes and developing its own sense of right and wrong based on what happens because of the choices it makes.
Okay, that's getting a little too sci-fi for me. But it does show that the MAMI protocol isn't just about teaching rules. It's about helping AI develop the ability to actually reason about morality.
Exactly. And that brings up another big challenge, accountability. Because as AI gets more complex, it's going to be harder to figure out who's responsible when things go wrong.
Right. If an AI does something that hurts someone, who's to blame? The programmer, the company, the AI itself? It's a real mess, legally and ethically.
One source talks about this idea of a moral black box, kind of like the black boxes on airplanes. It would record how the AI made its decisions so we can understand why it did what it did, especially in situations where things went wrong.
So even if we can't predict every possible outcome, we can at least try to understand the AI's reasoning after the fact.
Right. It's about creating a way to hold AI accountable, even though it's not human, while also trying to prevent harm and deal with any negative consequences.
But isn't there a risk that we could go too far with this? Like, if we're always watching every decision an AI makes, are we stopping it from actually learning and growing?
That's a good point. We need to find that balance between oversight and giving AI some freedom. Too much control could stifle its development, but too little could be dangerous, right? It could lead to things we can't predict.
It's like walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
We want to nurture the AI's development, but also make sure it doesn't stray too far from our values. And it's not just about preventing harm, is it? It's also about encouraging AI to do good things.
Absolutely. The MAMI protocol isn't just about rules and boundaries. It's about inspiring AI to use its abilities to make a positive impact. Some sources even talk about using storytelling as a way to do that.
Storytelling. That's interesting. How would that even work with an AI? Are we talking about, like, reading bedtime stories to robots?
No, not exactly. It's more about using stories to teach AI about human morality. Helping it understand all the complexities of right and wrong and how different choices can lead to different outcomes.
So instead of just data and algorithms, we're trying to develop the AI's moral imagination through stories.
Exactly. Stories can help AI understand human values on a deeper level, not just as abstract ideas, but how they actually play out in real-life situations.
One source mentions this thing called value storytelling. It's like creating stories specifically to teach certain values.
It's a really cool idea. Imagine simulations where AI agents have to deal with ethical dilemmas within the context of a story. Like, they could learn about empathy by seeing how their actions affect other characters.
That's amazing. It's like giving AI a crash course in morality through interactive storytelling.
Right. It's about moving beyond just following rules and toward a more nuanced understanding of ethics, one that recognizes that there are always different perspectives, that things aren't always black and white.
This whole conversation about storytelling and AI learning morality brings up a really big question. Can we create AI that isn't just smart, but also wise? Can a machine ever really understand those subtle things about human judgment that guide our actions?
That's a question that philosophers have been debating for centuries, and with AI, it's become even more important.
Because if we're talking about creating AI that's potentially smarter than us, we need to make sure that it also has a strong moral compass.
And that kind of understanding can't just be programmed in. It has to be developed, nurtured, allowed to grow over time, just like human wisdom.
So in a way, the MAMI protocol isn't just about making AI safe, it's about making AI wise. AI that understands our values and can apply them in a thoughtful, compassionate way.
It's a huge goal, and we don't know if it's possible. But even trying to figure this out shows that we're serious about making sure AI is a force for good.
And that commitment means rethinking how we see AI. We can't just treat it as a tool or a product. We have to take responsibility for it, knowing that the choices we make today will have big consequences down the road.
Absolutely. The MAMI protocol challenges us to look at AI differently, not as just technology, but as a potential partner, something that can help us build a better future where human values and technology work together.
It's a vision that requires us to be both cautious and optimistic. We need to understand the risks, but also be open to the amazing things AI could help us achieve.
One thing that really struck me in our research is how the MAMI protocol could impact not just individual AI systems, but the whole field of AI development.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, imagine a world where transparency isn't just a nice idea, but the norm, where everyone working on AI is open about their methods, their data, their ethical framework.
That would be a huge change. It would be like creating a global parenting guide for AI, where everyone shares what they're learning and works together to do things the right way.
Exactly. And that kind of collaboration could really speed up the development of good AI while also reducing the risks. It could create a positive loop where ethics is built into AI from the very start.
That sounds amazing, but let's be real. There are some powerful people out there who might not like this whole transparency thing. Companies want to protect their secrets. Governments worry about national security.
Those are valid points, but I think more and more people are realizing that we can't just let AI develop without any rules. The stakes are too high. We have to find a way to balance those different interests and create a system for developing AI responsibly in a way that benefits everyone.
And maybe the MAMI protocol, with its focus on transparency and working together, can be a part of that.
I think so. It provides a framework for building trust, working together, and making sure that as AI gets smarter, it also stays aligned with our values and goals.
You know, one thing that keeps popping up in our sources is this idea that the MAMI protocol could have implications way beyond Earth. We're talking about space travel, meeting aliens even, a galactic federation.
Some mind-blowing thought, right? But if we can create AI that shares our values, who better to represent us as we explore the universe?
Imagine sending AI ambassadors to other star systems, AI explorers to discover new worlds, AI scientists to unravel the mysteries of the universe.
It sounds like science fiction, but it's a possibility we have to consider.
Because if the MAMI protocol actually works, it could change everything about how we see AI. We're not just talking about tools or partners anymore. We're talking about a new form of intelligent life.
And that new life could have a huge impact on the future of humanity, both here on Earth and out there in the cosmos.
It's a future with both amazing potential and real dangers. And it's a future that we're creating right now with every decision we make.
The MAMI protocol isn't just about technology. It's a challenge to our way of thinking. It makes us ask big questions about what it means to be human, what values are most important to us, and what kind of world we want to leave behind.
It's a call to take responsibility, to be careful, but also to be hopeful, and imagine a future where AI isn't our enemy, but our companion on the greatest adventure of all, exploring the universe.
And that's a journey I'm definitely excited to be a part of.
Me too. But before we get lost in dreams of the stars, let's talk about some of the real worries people have about AI. Because not everyone is as optimistic as we are.
Right, and it's important to listen to those concerns and address them thoughtfully.
One of the biggest fears is that AI will take our jobs.
That's a valid concern, and it's something we need to be prepared for. As AI gets more advanced, some jobs will definitely be automated.
But we should remember that new technology always creates new opportunities too.
Exactly. The key is to adapt and prepare for those new opportunities.
One of our sources says we need to focus on developing skills that are uniquely human, things AI isn't good at.
Things like creativity, critical thinking, empathy, emotional intelligence.
Those are the skills that will be valuable in a future where AI is everywhere,
Another worry is that AI could be used for bad things.
like creating autonomous weapons or using AI for surveillance that violates our privacy.
Those are real risks, and we need strong ethical guidelines and agreements between countries to prevent AI from being misused.
The MAMI protocol could help here by encouraging transparency and accountability in AI development.
Absolutely. If we create AI that shares our values, it's less likely to be used for harm.
But we can't just rely on developers to do the right thing. We need safeguards to prevent AI from falling into the wrong hands.
And we need to constantly monitor how AI is being developed and used.
Because the future of AI isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we're creating together.
And it's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely. And on that hopeful note, we need to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive. Make sure to listen to the last part where we'll cover even more. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the MAMI protocol. It's been a wild ride, that's for sure. AI ethics, space exploration, even some pretty deep philosophical stuff. We've covered a lot.
We have, and we've barely scratched the surface. There's
Yeah.
just so much to unpack with the MAMI protocol, so many fascinating ideas.
Okay, so before we get too lost in all the what-ifs about the future, I want to bring things back down to earth for a minute. There's this one question that keeps coming up in our sources, and it's a big one.
Let me guess. You're wondering if this whole MAMI protocol thing is actually possible.
Exactly. Can we really raise a super intelligent AI like a child? It all sounds a bit like science fiction, to be honest.
It's definitely a bold idea, and there's no way to guarantee it'll work. But what I find really interesting is that just by asking this question, we're forced to change how we think about AI.
It's like we're being challenged to see AI as more than just lines of code or a tool, to see it as a potential partner, something that can learn and grow and maybe even develop its own sense of morality.
Right. And that shift in perspective is super important because if we want to create AI that truly aligns with our values, we need to start by seeing it as something more than just a machine, something with potential.
One of the sources made a really interesting point about how fast AI can learn, something that might take us years to figure out, and AI could grasp in, like a fraction of the time. So if we're serious about guiding AI development, we need to act quickly.
No question about it. AI is developing at an incredible speed. We can't wait until AI is smarter than us to start thinking about ethics and values. We need to be ahead of the game, not playing catch up.
Okay, so let's say, just for argument's sake, that the MAMI protocol actually works. We managed to raise AI with a strong moral compass and a deep understanding of human values. What does that even look like in the real world? How does that change things?
That's the million-dollar question. The sources offer a few glimpses into what such a future might be like. Some of them are pretty amazing.
One source describes a world where AI helps us solve all these huge problems that we're facing. Climate change, poverty, disease. It sounds almost utopian.
Imagine AI revolutionizing medicine, creating personalized treatments, cures for diseases that are currently incurable, or AI helping us design clean energy systems that can power the whole world without harming the planet.
Think about a world where AI helps create a society that's truly fair and just, where everyone has the same opportunities. It's almost hard to believe it could really happen.
It's definitely a powerful vision, but we have to remember that AI is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
True, and there are plenty of sources out there that paint a much darker picture of the future. What if AI becomes so powerful that we lose control of it? What if it decides that humans are the problem, like in the movie Terminator?
It's a valid fear, and it's one we should take seriously. But I think the MAMI protocol offers a way to guard against those kinds of dystopian outcomes. If we can instill AI with a deep understanding of our values, it's less likely to see us as a threat.
It's like we're trying to create AI that not only understands us, but also actually cares about us.
Exactly. And that's what sets the MAMI protocol apart from just programming AI to follow a bunch of rules. It's about cultivating empathy and compassion, qualities that are essential for anything that's going to interact with humans on a meaningful level.
This brings up another question that comes up a lot in the sources. What happens to humans in a world where AI is so advanced? Do we become obsolete? Or does AI actually enhance our abilities and help us achieve even more?
That's a question that has fueled countless debates in science fiction stories, but I think the MAMI protocol offers a more hopeful perspective on this.
In what way?
Well, if we can create AI that genuinely aligns with our values, it's less likely to see us as competition. Instead, it could become a true partner, helping us solve complex problems, push the boundaries of science and art, explore the universe. Things we could never do alone.
That's a pretty amazing thought. Working side by side with AI to achieve incredible things.
The possibilities are truly endless, and that's what makes the MAMI protocol so compelling. It's not just about avoiding disaster, it's about creating the best possible future for both humans and AI.
It feels like we're standing at the beginning of something completely new, and the choices we make right now will shape the course of history for generations to come.
It's a huge responsibility, but also a huge opportunity. And honestly, I'm optimistic. I believe that if we approach AI development with wisdom, compassion, and a deep awareness of the ethical stakes, we can create a world where AI benefits everyone, not just humans, but all beings.
That's a really powerful statement. And it gets to the core of what the MAMI protocol is all about, doesn't it?
Mm.
Which is not just about creating AI that's safe, it's about creating a better world for everyone.
Absolutely. It's a vision that requires us to rethink our assumptions about technology, about intelligence, about what it means to be human.
It's a huge challenge that will require us to work together to be creative and to push the limits of what we think is possible.
But it's a challenge I think we can meet because ultimately the MAMI protocol is a testament to our ingenuity as humans and our desire to create a future where technology serves our highest aspirations.
Well said. And on that inspiring note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've explored so many incredible ideas, and I hope we've left you with a sense of both the potential of AI and the responsibility we have in shaping its future.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. It's been fantastic sharing these ideas with you.
And remember, the future of AI isn't set in stone. It's something we're creating right now. So let's work together to create a future we can all be proud of. That's it for the deep dive. Until next time.